This guy's completely out of his mind, so tell me, why is he like this? Because he didn't just tame monsters, but also humans. And on top of that, his controlled power felt like a straight-up cheat code. Every time he tamed a monster, power surged through him, and new abilities unlocked like lights snapping on. So let's ditch the long setup and jump straight into the story. A ring of magic circles trapped a girl in their glowing dome, while the MC stood outside and hurled his own magic into the breach to save her. Then he couldn't stop himself from thinking, why is this happening to me? He still couldn't even wrap his head around it. His entire class got yanked into another world. So why was fate doing this to him? The blonde girl beside him grabbed him by the moment and shoved Haruto forward. Cornered with no other option, Haruto slammed his skilled tame on her childhood friend, watching her get transformed into a summoned beast. It was just another ordinary day at their high school until everything started to flip. Students were buzzing, trading hot takes about the newest manga releases. Haruto Tsutsui, a male student, accidentally caught the spoilers they were blabbing about, right in the middle of their conversation, and Yohei Namba, the straight-A king of their class, rubbed her the wrong way because he had zero tact, and then a short-haired girl marched up to him and asked what manga he was reading. It's Megumi, right there beside her best friend, Mina. Yohei wheeled on them and demanded, so when are you finally coming to hang out with me? Megumi shot back with an awkward laugh, and yeah, those basketball drills already keep him slammed every day. Still, it's true, he's a first-year prodigy, and he's there all the time. Suddenly, Mina shoved an envelope into Haruto's hands and demanded he deliver it straight to her mom. Yohei stared in confusion and blurted out, so, what's your deal? Megumi blurted out that they were childhood friends, and Mina lunged to stop her, but the damage was already done. Yohei slapped a hand on Haruto's back and smirked. Guess even the dull ones like him still stumble into perks. Mina tried to yank him back before he went too far. Then a bespectacled male student seized Yohei by the shoulder and barked, "Get back to your seat." Haruto got stuck alone with Mina, and the moment she glared at him, she turned on her heel and walked away. His focus snapped the moment the kid behind him smirked and said they looked awkward, like childhood friends who didn't know how to act anymore. Karen was smirking, and if she truly had a childhood bestie like Mina, you just knew she'd be biting her nerves to pieces. Haruto glared at her, raging that she left him hanging, and Karen just burst out laughing. Did he really think she'd call Yohei out for him? He should know how this works. Those two are terrible at this kind of thing, too. Haruto let out a heavy sigh and gave a weak nod, then his mind snapped back to Karen's words. Was he really awkward with Mina now? Because they'd gotten along so perfectly before. As Mina walked, she swung a look over her shoulder, spotted Haruto and Karen chatting, and huffed in a pout. She made it back to her seat, right on time. The ground jolted out of nowhere, shaking under everyone's feet. Gerudo swore it was an earthquake, clutched his desk, and yelled for Karen to grab onto something. Right then, he heard a scream tearing out from Mina. Was hurtling straight toward him, fast enough to steal his breath. When he caught her, Mina bolted the moment she realized it was him, cheeks burning. Haruto, who had zero clue why she really ran, sank, wondering if he'd somehow ruined everything. Karen called out to him. Then they whipped their heads around, and just like that, the classroom vanished, replaced by a brand new summoning location. Haruto stared around, heart racing, trying to figure out where on earth they'd ended up. A shrill voice burst out, shaking with worry at how many of them there were. This wasn't supposed to end like this. The butler told her to lay out the whole situation to the heroes first, so she swallowed her nerves and cleared her throat before speaking. She doesn't just step forward, she introduces herself to everyone at last. Felia Elmond, the first princess of the Kingdom of Elmond. While the crowd buzzed with confusion, Karen and Haruto instantly clocked what was really going on. Felia kept casting magic, pulling up a 3D map of their kingdom in front of everyone and then slamming the truth. This world is nothing like the one they came from, because, according to the legends, they were summoned here as heroes. Haruto just knew it, and isekai summoning was about to rip reality open. Karen clocked it too and nudged him, asking what kind of power he even had. Then she stared back when he looked worried like, "Wait, you're going there already." Yeah, it's the old school spark. She stumbled onto something thrilling, and the whole moment lit up. Right when their talk was heating up, Yohei, one of their classmates, burst in and demanded to know what they even meant by hero. He shot Philia a vicious glare, insisting she'd been spewing pure nonsense the entire time. The bespectacled student clutched his shoulder, trying to steady him, and swore this whole mess was just like the manga Yohei was reading. Yohei couldn't accept it, because after everything, it was still just a manga. But the glasses guy swore it was real, because what kind of trick could possibly yank their entire class into a whole new world? There's only one way something like that could happen. Someone must have cracked open real magic. Hearing that, the other students instantly started buzzing with murmurs, trading frantic whispers. Karen barked out a laugh at all of them, begging to go home, then shrugged like, since we're here anyway, we might as well make the best of it. Philia told them, yeah, confusion is normal, and then she promised them the same thing every legend swears. Once they finish the mission, they'll come back safe to their original world. Yohei snapped in rage, demanding to know if she wanted them to take down a demon lord, like every manga kicks off. Philia nodded seriously. Are we really doing the classic thing? Their kingdom calls in heroes once every few centuries to take on threats that threaten the whole continent. Every time those threats change, the legends stay the same, heroes charging in, swinging steel, and cutting down dragons and demon lords like nightmares come to life. Honestly, they still had no clue what kind of disaster was coming for them this time. So they're stuck right where they are, no home until they crack the answer. Philly with her head bowed, muttering apologies. Then out of nowhere, someone materialized right beside her. That's her brother, Rogues Elmond, the first prince of this kingdom. Philia whipped her gaze to her brother in worry. Normally there's just one hero, not around 30, and she can't stop worrying how on earth they'll manage to host all of them. Hearing that, the glasses guy snapped up and asked, wait, can you really handle this, or are we way more than you expected? So you're telling me they got dragged in without consent, shoved onto some foggy mission just to get home, with zero details and no reward at all, and he basically warned, don't you dare mess with us. Sure, call them heroes if you want, but if you can't even pay them, they're not moving a muscle. The other students surged in with him, and suddenly Philly was all flustered. She flapped her hands and promised them the royal family would absolutely roll out the finest hospitality. Then she grinned and said that once everyone understands the threat, they've got enough people here to handle it. Hey, he clenched his fist and roared, so tell me who's gonna do it. Then again, this place didn't look very advanced at all, like, do they even have baths here? And right away, one of the mages snapped, accusing Yohei of making fun of them. Yohei snapped around glaring in rage, and Philia stepped in fast to shut that mage down before he could rile them up again, because they're the summoned heroes. Meanwhile, Karen leaned in and hissed to Haruto that Yohei couldn't go a full minute without poking a problem, and Haruto just nodded along, like this was the usual pattern for him. Right then, Rogue slipped in from behind Yohei and clamped his chin, whispering that he didn't have to worry. He'll make sure their daily needs are handled, and he'll take point on the whole investigation into the threats, and then he snapped his gaze to Yohei like, are you even listening? Yohei yanked Rogue's arm and begged him to let go, because that was freaking him out. Rogue smirked again, fired off the same question, and crushed the room with suffocating pressure. Yohei finally caved in, dropping his pride as he slid back onto the floor. Rogue slapped his hands together to grab every eye in the room, then demanded someone spell out exactly what they wanted, and what would actually win them over, because they had no clue what people from another world even craved. Megumi shot her hand up, and the rogues all snapped their attention to her, pleading with her to sneak into his room tonight. The students' faces flared red as they gasped in disbelief, because they knew exactly what it meant. Megumi was totally baffled. Why did it asterisk have asterisk to be his room? That request was so weird it didn't even make sense, and wasn't getting invited to his room supposed to feel like some kind of honor. Megumi mulled it over. Yeah, she had no real choice. Mina raced to stop her, but the rogues had already locked it in. Then he told everyone this straight-up truth. A summoning won't work unless both sides willingly agree, and wow, they never expected it to pull in this many people. But that only proves one thing. Somewhere in this crowd, someone is desperate to change the world for real. No need to rush, either, because the ones who want it will move on their own, right on schedule. And when it all finally settles, each person gets exactly what they've earned. Megumi lit up and asked if they could use magic too. Just like she figured, every one of those summoned people comes packed with special powers. Rogue shot back with a confident yes, proudly flexing his magic as proof. And yeah, on top of magic, there are skills, a whole other kind of power. When the heroes are summoned, their bodies shoot past this world's limits, and their special skills come straight with the power. Not gonna lie, this deal is pretty darn good, right? Yohei gripped his fist tight, buzzing with pure excitement. Yeah, this is exactly how they should have started. Then he leaned in and asked, so what kind of power do you have? Once they wrapped their heads around magic and skills, everyone's mood flipped like a switch. Earlier, they couldn't wait to leave, but now they're chasing after a shot at real power. Karen couldn't resist a smug snicker as she nudged Haruto. And yeah, you can tell he's starting to feel it too, right? Haruto finally glanced away, basically admitting it. The rogue spun around and shot a look at Philia. Skills were her turf, so he handed it over to her on the spot. She stepped forward and started checking everyone's skills. A glowing magic circle burst into view in front of her as she unleashed her appraisal skill. Just like the heroes' reputations promised, every single one of them pulls out skills that are absolutely unreal. And yeah, especially Yohei, his power is unreal. Yohei's face lit up as he burst out. What kind of power is it? Since they all came from a world with zero skills and no magic, the smartest move was to show it to them right away. Philia reached out to Haruto and demanded his help. She figured he'd be the perfect living example for everyone to witness, because his power really is something else. Yohei shot her down on the spot, yelling that she better not pick Haruo and demanding she choose him over some nobody, because man, he wants to be the main character so bad it's ridiculous. Then the glasses guy snatched his shoulder to hold him back once he clocked the mage glaring at them, and Yohei clicked his tongue and finally sat down. He couldn't help but show his contempt. He snapped his eyes at Haruto, and Haruto shot him a nervous glance back before Yohei dared to step forward, teeth clenched tight, he shot Philia a question. What did she need from him? She didn't hesitate. She pointed to the side and told him to look over there. Once it happened, his eyes snapped wide open the second he saw a brutal cage that trapped what looked like a feral tiger, snarling behind the bars. It's a regal, a baby monster right now, but once it finishes growing, it turns into pure dragon-level terror, and even this size earns it an official B rank, as deadly as 100 regular soldiers. Haruto's gut screamed that something was off, but he still leaned in and listened hard to Philia explain his skill. Turns out, it's totally tame. Philia shot up behind him and wrapped her arms around his chest, her curves pressed right against his back. Mina snapped her gaze at them like daggers. Monsters at that level usually can't be controlled, but with Haruto's power, it just might be possible. She shoved him toward the cage and demanded he hold his hand up to the royal beast. Haruto fought back, flinching and leaning away in terror as the regal started to growl. Philia shot him a reassuring look. It's fine. Just say the words and the power will kick in. All you've got to do is say tame, and Haruto was already about to object. Yohei yelled from behind, pushing him to hurry up and just do it. Under pressure, he shot his hand up and roared, tame, and a blazing magic circle erupted before his palm, blasting everyone with a brutal gust of wind. The cage lock snapped open with a sickening click, making Haruto shriek in terror as the regal lunged straight at him. Rage hit a wall, he froze mid-breath, mouth hanging open as the regal hugged him instead, and shoved him onto the floor, licking his face like he owned the place. This is tame, a skill that lets him command a beast. With his hero power, he should be able to shut down any opponent in his path. After that, Philia sized up the other students' skills in one sharp, no-nonsense look. Meanwhile, Haruto lounged on a corner, the regal sprawled across his lap like a treasure. Karen strutted up to him, lavishing praise on his tame, controlled skill, acting like he'd fully mastered that regal force. So she scooted right next to him and asked what its name was, and Haruto froze for a second before blurting, Rai, and the regal practically adored it. Karen burst into laughter like, wait, did you name him Rai because he's a regal? That's way too easy. Haruto instantly pouted and shut her down, ignoring her completely. Telling her to prove her skills to Philia too, but here's the twist, she'd already done it. Her mixing skill was so sharp it felt like it leveled up her every try, making everything she mixed come together better than before. It's kind of dull, what a total bummer. She wanted something way flashier, but Haruto's got a plan, she's going to master it anyway. Karen let out a sly chuckle and leaned back against the wall. I'll do my best. Haruto scanned the crowd, dying to know what kind of power they'd all brought. His gaze slid over to Yohei, who smacked the wall with zero effort. His power was body enhancement, one touch that cranks his physical abilities way past normal. And yeah, like a true hero, he slammed right through a royal court mage's earthwall magic. And when Yohei saw it, he flashed a smug smirk at the same mage he'd been locked in a beef with since earlier, the one now visibly seething. The glasses dude closed in, and Yohei's skill was pure muscle, simple, ruthless, and exactly the kind of power a guy like him needed. Yohei slung his arm around Akamoto's shoulder with a grin and teased him about what kind of skill he'd learned, then laughed, saying it probably didn't even top his. Akamoto adjusted his glasses, snapped, stepped back, and even though Yohei was totally baffled, he still obeyed. The moment he moved, rocks came crashing down on the student who was passing by, right where Yohei had been standing earlier. Akamoto's ace was future sight. He could peek a split second into the future, just long enough to predict what would happen. Yohei shrugged him off and strode up to Megumi, who was right there mending the student who'd gotten hurt earlier. Turns out her skill was pure healing magic. Philia sized up Mina's skills and boom, it was magic enhancement, the kind that multiplies her magic power several times over, and lands right on the same level as Yohei's body enhancement. Karen spotted the chaos around Mina and ran to tell Haruto. After all, she's his childhood friend, right? Haruto didn't even bite. He just shot back that it wasn't his business. And yeah, that childhood friend story is yesterday's news. She's been dodging him like crazy ever since. To see what Mina could really do, they set up a target she could hit, but Mina panicked because she'd never cast a single spell before. Philia snapped an apology into the air and laid out the whole method step by step. First, she told him to picture fire. Then she poured that image straight into her mana, like she was feeding it power from the inside. Philia clenched her will, then nailed the target, right on the spot just like that. That's the whole trick for using magic, but it sure didn't look like any basic stunt to me. Karen sat there with Haruto and leaned in to whisper that Philia was a little rough around the edges, but Haruto just shrugged. He thought she was simply open-minded, the kind of truth you only see in noble hearts. The wannabe main character jumped in and tested it all by himself, and set off a blazing inferno he couldn't control or put out. Mina was one heartbeat away from getting hurt, so Haruto burst into motion and slammed himself to her side. Rogues burst in to save the day, then slammed a spell Aqua Ring into place to burn the danger out. He told them not to panic, he's right here, so if Mina snaps and loses control, he'll take over and handle it. Oh hey, there he was, soaked to the bone, glaring daggers at those rogues, and they just smirked back like it was all a joke. Then the rogues spun toward Mina and told her, do whatever you want, if anything blows up, he'll handle it. Mina opened her mouth to protest. Yohei yanked her hard and barked orders, so what's his problem? Why is bro picking fights with everyone? Mina clenched her teeth as Yohei's powerful grip locked in on her, and she screamed at full force, and her magic detonated. Magic circles blasted into a spinning dome around her, while Yohei got flung away like the universe finally snapped. Everyone stared on edge, hearts pounding, desperate to figure out what the heck was going on. Folks rushed in and told everyone to calm Mina down because, and Philia, along with the mages, followed their orders without hesitation. But Mina's power was on a whole other level, way too massive to hold back. They got shoved back hard, and at this pace, Mina's about to get seriously hurt. Philia spun in place and used her appraisal skill to scrutinize everything around her. She was scanning the crowd like she had someone specific to find. When she finally tracked down Haruto, she grabbed his shoulder and demanded he use his skill to tame Mina. Every head snapped toward him, stunned to the core that something like this could even happen. Because that's basically brainwashing, Yohei blurted, that's insane. But Philia shoved him forward and demanded he hurry. If they fail, her magic will rip through her body, then she'll transform into a monster. Still, Haruto froze for a heartbeat, like his courage slipped right out of his hands. He kept staring at the question, panicking. Was it really okay to turn someone into a familiar while his mind was swallowing him whole? Karen thumped his back hard, snapping him right back to reality, and told him to stop freezing up. This was no time to hesitate. Watching Mina slowly morph into a monster before my eyes, Haruto strode forward with pure grit because he had to pull the exact same move he did with Rai right, bet. He threw his arms wide, snapped his skill into action, tame. Mina's pressure shoved him backward, and it honestly feels like he's one bad moment away from getting blown clean away. Philia clutched his arm, propped him up, and pleaded, hold on just a little longer, please. Haruto spun back toward Mina as she mumbled his name and lunged for him with her hand out. Suddenly, he got yanked back to that moment when Mina, years ago, was sobbing and begging forgiveness, swearing it was her fault. Back then, he ruffled her hair and told her everything was fine because he'll shield her from anything that comes, no matter what it costs. That old promise back then, he's gonna make sure it happens, no doubts, no delays. A massive explosion erupted, and for an instant, everyone's vision was completely wiped out by the blinding light. As the dust finally settled, and those magic circles shattered to scrap, Haruto was revealed cradling the collapsed Mina in his arms. Philia slapped a proud hand on Haruto's shoulder and grinned. It worked. Mina's taming was finally complete. Other folks whispered to each other, panicking that Tame might be turning humans too. Gerudo whipped his gaze around, dread clawing at his chest as Mina slowly cracked her eyes open. A few days after everything blew up, Haruto stood beside a tree, shoulders slumped as he let out a heavy sigh. Karen, right beside him, teased, if you keep sighing, happiness will sprint off, and honestly it feels like it already escaped. Aaron snapped a warning, if he was serious, someone would stab him, earning Haruto another heavy sigh as he shot back, so who's gonna stab me? After all that, everyone's already dodging him like he's trouble, and shooting him those super weird looks. A few days after the summoning, their life in the other world was surprisingly smooth, and nothing ever felt truly hard. Every morning they drilled through the country's history, the deeds of past heroes, economics, and writing. Then every afternoon they threw themselves into light magic and fights. And just like you'd expect from heroes, they all snapped up skills so fast they started outclassing even the magic users. Haruto let out another heavy sigh, and Karen clocked it instantly. Then bam, a girl got shoved and landed right in front of them. But then she spotted Haruto. She bolted into the distance, screaming at the top of her lungs. It's like the whole world's living on edge, terrified he'll tame them the moment he sets his sights on someone. Yeah, of course that's going to happen the second they realize taming isn't just for monsters, it works on people too. Haruto asked Karen if she could stick with him, and she burst out laughing, because if he wasn't around, then who would she even talk to? Her laid-back answer left him staring, thinking she's not even scared of the idea of him trying to tame her. Then he spun toward Mina, who stood right beside him. Mina caught his glare and snapped, "What's wrong?" So Haruto just turned his eyes away, and ever since he tamed her, she's never left his side. It's all about the taming, because now, unlike before, she isn't cautious around him anymore. He's basically hogging the class's most beautiful girl, and the boys aren't just watching, they're shooting him daggers with every glare. Villiers admits they have no clue how to cancel TAIM, but they've got to figure it out. Meanwhile, Haruto can only activate PSY. Mina stared him down with pure determination, because this is her moment to strike. Somewhere along the way, she stopped being able to speak the truth without thinking, straight up inherited it from her mom and dad. Now she can pin it all on Tame and do whatever she wants, because she's seconds away from slipping her hand into Haruto's. Karen suddenly blurted it out, flinching hard and yanking her hand back, because she remembered she'd left the Nuka fermentation bed just like that. Mina watched Karen and Haruto trade their usual barbs, snapping back and forth like always. Karen always glued to Haruto's side, and the very same girl she's been secretly envying for ages. When Mina finally spoke to her, she came off as a total sweetheart, but that's exactly why she couldn't afford to drop her guard. As Karen drifted into her thoughts, I bet she was wearing those unrefined glasses just to stay under the radar, but she's honestly gorgeous, and she's probably hiding her curves too. No, she can't let herself get too weak. Her familiarity is the one special power she's allowed to lean on. So she has to grab this chance, no excuses. Mina's eyes snapped wide when she felt it coming, and she blurted a warning to Haruto. Right as she did, a brutal attack streaked toward him and clipped past his head by a hair. Then Yohei blurted out an apology. He didn't look the least bit sorry, he just wore a smug smirk and bragged that his magic had flown off. Akimoto right on his tail barked, "Go right twice, up twice, down twice, right, left, down, left again, right, up, right, left, then spin around and turn." Yohei spun toward him, confused, already opening his mouth to ask what he meant. Then Mina suddenly fired a storm of blazing arrows straight at him. Then it finally clicked, Akimoto's words hit home, and he dodged just like that, exactly as Akimoto told him. Unbelievably, he came out unhurt, then the blasts detonated right behind his back. He clenched his teeth and glared at Mina, furious that she pulled the same excuse he'd used earlier. Sparks burst through the air as they locked eyes, each one daring the other to blink first. When Karen abruptly shouted at them to stop fighting over her, Haruto instantly felt like it probably wasn't even about him. Yeah, but deep down, it's probably his fault. Right then the rogues burst in and snapped, "Heroes don't tear each other apart." He had two women latched onto him, while he urged them to stop fighting and start getting along. Every man snapped with rage and swore he was only looking for a fight from here on out. Even Yohei was seething, glaring straight at him. Rogues smirked like they hadn't done a thing, he was only trying to greet the girls. But if he's got a problem with it, he'll jump at the chance, he'll take him on without hesitation. Yeah, that just wasn't happening. The other day, a bunch of students tried challenging the rogues, and rogues crushed every single one of them. Sure, rogues was thrilled they kept getting stronger day by day, but Akimoto's future sight snapped the danger in half the moment those fire's arrows flew, and Yohei's body enhancement let him dodge every single one like it was nothing. Both of them left everyone stunned. Then he snapped to Mina. She'd totally mastered magic enhancement, and you could bet it was all thanks to Tame. Taming doesn't just boost the tamer, it empowers the tamed too. When he tamed the Regal, both their powers surged, and when he tamed Mina, energy started flowing through all three of them, leveling them up even more. The more Haruto tames, the more power explodes inside him. Karen squealed, wondering if she was next to get tamed. Then it was like Haruto's agreeing with her. Right in the middle of Haruto and Mina's moment, a bunch of rogues suddenly popped up. Then Haruto tried to charm Mina into slipping into his room. She flat out refused, saying she wasn't the least bit interested in his room. Rogue snapped back, glaring at Haruto, and you could tell he had no clue what just happened. He slipped away without a word, flicked his hand at her, and told her she could come anytime she got curious. Haruto told Mina she didn't have to cut rogues that deep. She scowled at him, and now you're wondering if he's basically saying it would have been fine if she'd just gone with him. Is that what he means? Haruto snapped back to argue, but she had already spun away, pouting like he'd just ruined everything. The very next day, Philia slammed her announcement in class. She said they were heading straight for a dungeon. She was convinced the moment had finally arrived. Everyone needed real, hands-on experience now. Rogue said the dungeon is packed with the perfect monsters to test their skills, and the rewards match too, so yeah, that's the best place to grind experience. Karen practically buzzed with excitement about the dungeon, and once Haruto finally caught up with them in this new world, Mina just grinned. She figured it would be a walk in the park since he's got experience. But Haruto still doubts it, because he's nowhere near as strong as her. Out of nowhere, Yohei planted a kick into the desk behind Haruto and blurted, "So, what's this dungeon about?" Alright, first things first, let's start with a wild lecture on exactly what a dungeon is. A dungeon's just ruins drenched in magic. Step inside and you'll find rare magical tools, deadly traps waiting to spring, and monsters that want you gone. As they push deeper into the dungeon, the air turns thick with magic, and every monster that bursts out hits harder than the last. The danger level and capture difficulty rise with how much magic is packed inside, and capture difficulty has 10 brutal stages. Anything at stage 7 or higher is still a mystery to humanity, practically unmeasurable. And this time the dungeon they're rushing into is a whopping level 7 grind to capture. That sudden spike in difficulty rattled the students, but Philia kept her cool and told them to breathe easy. Since they're only climbing to the 3rd floor, the dungeon's already been cleared up to there, and every hallway's mapped out too, so the danger is basically gone. Yohei protested and Philia nodded. Yeah, this stuff was way too dull for a hero, and it honestly sounded like it would put everyone to sleep. One slip and they're done for, because the moment they drop their guard, death swings in. Even if the route is mapped, that doesn't mean it's safe. Hidden traps lurk, pits snap shut, and arrows can still rain down, but then there are runs where you get teleported into a mysterious space with no way out. As long as they don't go poking random, unknown objects with zero caution, they'll be totally fine. She's crossing her fingers that their very first dungeon run is going to be an absolute blast. Maybe they'll stumble on priceless magic tools, or even strike gold with hidden treasures. They leave tomorrow and this exploration eats up the whole day, so prep like your life depends on it. They'll be handing out maps, so lock in and study them before you go. The dungeon they're rushing into is none other than the Royal Tomb. The very next day, the students marched into the dungeon with shaky hands and scared looks plastered on their faces. Philia was right there with them, breaking it down fast. This dungeon wouldn't be solo, it would run in squads of 3, so everyone needed to lock into a team of 3. As expected, Haruto, Mina, and Karen are teaming up, 3 of them, side by side. If Haruto ditches Karen, she's going to get stuck with whatever's left, and she definitely didn't want that. Meanwhile, Mina is his familiar, so yeah, it's basically a given. Haruto shot back, asking if they were really sure about this. Then Karen snapped into confidence and said, "Yep, we're sure." With teamwork on the line, they had no choice but to fall in line and get along. Behind them, the main character refused to fall behind. He was determined to be just like that too. He leaned in with a smug smirk, like he was plotting something bad. Right before the dungeon exploration, rogues pulled him aside and warned him straight up, Haruto is dangerous. If people find out there's a hero who can tame humans, it's going to spark needless conflict fast. Yohei probably thinks the same, right? But honestly, he doesn't seem to care, so why drag him out here and call him out in the first place? Rogue slapped his shoulder to calm him down, and he knew Yohei never liked him, but he hates Haruto even more than that, right? Sure, none of them have slipped out of the royal palace yet, because they're all determined to keep his existence hidden from everyone. So that's why he's pushing Yohei to take him out. Yohei shot a smirk back, asking if he was really sure, because yeah, he was, and out of all the heroes, he was the only one tough enough to take it on. But with Haruto's strength, Mina hovering at his side is still going to make everything feel brutal. So he handed over a magic tool, and even threw in his personal guard, the strongest force in the entire country. The operation hits tomorrow, and if one person vanishes, nobody's going to pin it on him. And honestly, in dungeons, accidents are the usual price of survival. Back to the dungeon, Philia snapped at them to keep their eyes peeled for traps and monsters, and to report it the second anyone in their trio gets hurt or vanishes. Then she rushed to apologize to Haruto for putting him in that dangerous front spot, and he waved it off, telling her none of it was her fault. 2 hours earlier, and the night was still quiet before everything kicked off. Yohei leaned over and asked Philia if the front of the line was really the deadliest spot. Akimoto just stared at him, baffled, while Philia nodded and said, "Yeah, it's the most dangerous. Because whoever marches up first gets the enemy's attention, and when the line starts pulling back, that same person gets stuck holding the rear guard." Yohei smirked and basically dared everyone to admit it. The strongest should be front and center. Philia agreed once more, so the kingdom's strongest, the rogue's royal guard, should be at the front, but Yohei snapped, pushing Haruto to take the lead instead. "And tell me, doesn't it feel horrible knowing someone like that can tame humans and just walk behind you? That's pure nightmare fuel." When Haruto remembered how that useless Yohei pulled it off, his face twisted into a frown. Then he threw out an apology to Karen and Mina for getting stuck in the front, and they told him not to worry, because it wasn't like they had anyone else to team up with besides him. And with Mina being Haruto's familiar, it just made perfect sense. Haruto also thanked Rai for hauling the bags, then his instincts screamed, because something felt asterisk off up ahead. The guard demanded what it was, and Yohei sneered, mocking him for being scared. Then bam, a whole swarm of eyes flickered into view in the dark. Then the bat-type monsters erupted into the sky and came barreling toward them. Panic erupted in the classroom, and the students scrambled to flee. Mina calmly slammed it down by firing up a firewall. The monsters screamed as they got blasted by flames, then crashed down hard onto the ground. From that moment on, Haruto didn't just try, he smashed through every test and proved he was a real hero. The other classmates cut through the monsters with ease, and the whole dungeon conquest rolled along without a hitch. They finally burst through the gate that leads to the lower levels, where the monsters beyond will be even stronger, so Philia pushed for a quick break right now. They threw down mats to sit on, kicked back, and chowed down while they took a well-earned break. Haruto scanned the room, and man, everyone looked wiped out, like every ounce of energy had been drained. Especially when Karen shows up, then. Then he spun to Mina and asked if she was okay. She said yes, only to instantly backtrack. Yeah, she was wiped out, so she yanked her way onto his lap, and Karen shot up all of a sudden, like she couldn't wait to see the drama blow up. But Haruto snapped her attention and told her and Karen to share Rai as a pillow. Karen wrapped her arms around Rai and apologized, swearing he was meant for just one person. So yeah, Haruto finally caved and agreed. But she snapped up the moment she felt her. She insists she was just playing around, but even if they've tamed her, she still has lines she won't cross. Haruto nodded, especially with everyone watching, and Karen shot him a teasing smirk, then asked if it would be fine if nobody looked. When Haruto said he'd allow that much, Karen's grin only got bigger. Mina's whole world shattered, and she blew it all to pieces. She couldn't catch a single word of their conversation. He just sat there stunned and couldn't stop asking, why is she always like this? Haruto's voice yanked her back. He asked if she was okay, and she quickly looked away, waving it off that she was fine, but Haruto didn't buy it because she looked painfully pale. Didn't he lock her in a storage room once? So in his mind, it had to be fear of dark, cramped places. Mina beamed, thrilled that he'd actually dug up a memory from ages ago. Right when everything was about to click, Karen snapped back, wait, she had something good coming. Tada, she yelled and busted out a mixed potion. It rips through the haze, restores her mind and body, and even cuts down physical damage, so when she caught their doubtful looks, her glare snapped into place. Who wouldn't side-eye that? Last time, she dumped on Haruto a whole pile of dead-end failures. Right then, Philia slipped in behind Karen, sized up the potion in a heartbeat, and shot them a calm look, telling them it would work exactly how she promised. But before she could react, a guard snapped her name and summoned her. Karen stared at her, jaw tight, because her appraisal skill synced perfectly with alchemy, while jealousy burned in Karen's chest. She spun around and thrust the mixed potion at them, saying, cool, if you approve, then drink it all right now. Still kinda unsure, they gulped it down anyway. They jolted, snapping their eyes open in pure shock, and the wild part is, they didn't just recover, they felt stronger and more energized than ever. Karen let out a giggle and shot them a heartfelt thank you for the compliment. Yohei watched from the shadows as rogues, royal guards stepped in and demanded the very thing rogues had promised him. Yohei pulled it out, and the royal guard slammed it into action. Now it's go time. The thing in Yohei's hand suddenly erupted into flashing light as he realized he had to figure out what it even was. The royal guard grabbed his attention and warned him this was a teleportation trap, baiting him to step right in. Philia mentioned yesterday that some unseen force just yeeted him into this totally mysterious space. Yohei snapped, "What's happening?" and the royal guard quickly soothed him because he can just throw it away before it ever activates. Yohei flashed a cocky grin and hurled it straight at Haruto, who caught it without breaking stride. Yohei flashed a wicked smirk as he watched the teleportation train tear through the air. Haruto got a trap stab in the hand, and suddenly he couldn't throw a thing. He barked at Karen and Mina to back off, right now. They latched onto him even harder, hanging on like they'd never let go again. It was already over. No way Mina was letting him walk out solo, not when she's his familiar. Haruto clicked his tongue as countless hands burst out of the teleportation trap and slammed over them like a protective dome. The second it vanished, the three of them vanished too. The teleportation trap slammed down onto the ground. Philia screamed in panic, and the blade sliced them clean in two. Haruto suddenly remembered that time he chatted with Karen while staring at Mina. But when she clocked his stare, she couldn't look away, because something in it told her she wasn't the only one feeling it. She snapped her gaze away from him, and Karen shouted at the top of her lungs, begging him to look back, but he refused to turn around. Until her voice started screaming louder. He snapped awake to Mina straddling him and Karen right beside him, both shouting his name. He jolted upright, scanned the room like a cornered prey, and couldn't stop wondering where the hell they'd been dropped. Karen had zero clue she couldn't spot an exit, until the trap snapped, and right then they got teleported away. The air's magical energy hits like the royal tombs, so it sounds like they got dumped down to a lower level. Aaron practically exhaled in relief, because for a second, she really thought they'd been hurled into some unknown dimension. He spun toward her, and just as his eyes landed, her glasses slipped right off. Karen scoffed at his lame reaction. Yeah, he'd already clocked they were fake, so she figured she didn't even need to bother. Karen's cheeks flared as a blush shot up her face. She couldn't believe he'd noticed, and honestly, she's still weird, hiding her pretty smile behind those glasses. Right then, Mina snapped awake and greeted Haruto with a warm, cheerful good morning, and honestly, the two of them just froze, because this was wildly out of character for her. Realizing what she'd done, she bolted away, screaming her head off in pure embarrassment. Haruto let out a breath of relief. She looked totally fine, and maybe Karen's potion kept the damage from getting ugly. Mina demanded where they were, and Haruto told her they'd probably landed in a lower level of the royal tomb. Karen then said, maybe someone will come rescue us, as long as it's not too deep. But Haruto couldn't shake the feeling, so Mina leaned in and demanded, what do you mean by that? And he insisted Yohei was grinning right then. And that's when the commander of the royal guard stepped in too. Both of them froze in shock, not expecting it at all, and Mina snapped, why would they even do that? Haruto's mind clicked. He figured Yohei and the royal guard probably cooked up the whole trap just to get him out of the picture, and when he replayed it now, it screamed fake from the start. Karen couldn't shake the question, why would this happen? She fully expected it from Yohei, but shouldn't the royal guards answer to the rogues, not anyone else? Haruto didn't want to believe it, yet deep down he knew it. The rogues had to be pulling the strings behind all of this. Mina got absolutely rattled, so what, is it because of her? Because she rejected his rogue turn. Haruto seized her shoulders and told her, it isn't your fault, because his tamed skill makes people see him as a threat, no matter what he does. Right then, Mina finally spotted the wounds on Haruto's hand. She dropped to her knees, wrapped it up fast, and demanded, so what do we do next? Even if they manage to slip away, they can't retreat to the castle when rogues are gunning for them. Haruto's the next one, so if he fakes his death, the two of them could slip back and return. But the two didn't even give that idea a chance. They shut it down on the spot. Then maybe they'd just hop to another country, because with a tamed skill this strong, he could probably open his own zoo or something wild like that. Mina shot up and swore she'd join him, jumping in to help run the zoo. Whatever it is, she's not letting go. She's his familiar, plain and simple, so yeah, she can follow him right. And if Karen goes back alone, she'll be miserable and stuck by herself, and yeah, she'd rather die right here with him. Haruto shot her a warning and begged her to never spill that kind of ominous doom again. Yet he can't exactly deny it either. First, they've got to escape this place, but there's not a single exit in sight. At least they've stocked up on food that'll last them a few days. Rai suddenly snapped a growl, and right then, a monster came crashing in from. Rai launched himself from the wall to intercept the attack meant for Haruto, throwing his own body in the way. A massive wolf-shaped nightmare monster. Mina planted her feet and unleashed her magic, begging them to blast the monster, but Haruto snapped back, stepping in himself to deal with it while it glared down at them. Because there was one thing he'd been dying to try, he went for it the second the monster lunged in, mouth stretched wide open. Haruto fired off his skill, and it went to work taming the chaos in an instant. A brutal wind howled past them like it wanted to tear the world apart as the monster smirked and pressed itself against Haruto, its tail wagging like it owned the moment. No way he actually managed to tame something this insanely strong. Turns out it's all Mina. Her crushing magic hit the monster, and it immediately backed off, giving him the perfect opening to tame it. Karen couldn't hide her shock. Somehow she knew it wasn't just her power rising, everyone else had surged. So yeah, this monster's basically Mina's level, and Mina is probably the strongest in the kingdom, except for the rogues. That's a massive win, because a tamer gets stronger from their familiar's abilities, and the familiar levels up right along with their tamer. Karen's jealousy flared up fast, and she blurted that she wished she could be tamed. Then Mina shut that whole moment down, refusing to share her privilege, and pivoted instantly to, so, what are we naming Haruto's new familiar? Haruto paused to think, and when Karen said it reminded her of the golden retriever she used to have, the room went quiet for a second. So Haruto went ahead and named him Rado, and Karen just stared like, seriously, that's random. Honestly, it tracks. MCs always seem to have the worst naming sense. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Rado adores his new name. Haruto jogged over to the hole Rado blasted into the wall and told him, enlarge it a bit, we need to slide through easier. Rado wind, I guess I'm asking for miracles again. They can squeeze through it, yeah, probably, and then Rado suddenly erupted with a bone-deep howl, making the whole room quake with a deafening rumble. Then a whole swarm of monsters burst into the room, slamming through the floor and smashing through the walls like it was nothing. They were Rado's packmates through and through, and yeah, it looked like he was the alpha, running the whole crew. Mina refused to believe it, but her gut said Haruto would take control of every last one, and turns out she was spot on because he was already planning to try. He threw his hands up and slammed his skill on, taming every last one of them. Minakot Haruto stumbled because he burned through too much mana, then blurted that her power had to have surged too. He's not wrong, now he's got her magic under control, and it feels way easier. Haruto sprang out of bed, paced the room, and sniffed around like he was trying to solve Mina like a mystery. Looks like he unlocked brand new skills. Now his senses are razor sharp, he can smell everything way more intensely than before. And he's got the same ability to see right through walls, probably Rado and the others, powers bouncing off him, and that means dungeon crawling just got way easier. As soon as he spun around, he caught Mina wrapped around Karen, shoving him away with a warning to stop peeking, and then she hit him with, you pervert. She didn't mind the whole see-through thing, not even the awkward way it lets him peek through walls, but if he pulls those lewd skills on Karen, he's going to get slammed hard. Haruto shot down the accusation on the spot, insisting she's got it completely wrong. He doesn't do it for anything dirty, he just sees it like some kind of thermal vision and can flip it on and off. Karen told Mina she was totally fine, then rushed to apologize for slipping and using her first name without thinking, while Mina shrugged it off, saying it was no big deal since Mina calls her the same way too. Karen whipped around to Haruto, and suddenly it clicked. Power and skills surged in her like a cheat code meant for legends. This world doesn't seem to have points or leveling up, so only Haruto and his familiars will keep getting stronger. If familiars can have kids, wouldn't their power go through the roof and multiply like crazy? Mina's face lit up red as a tomato. So Karen leaned in and swore it wasn't the kind of thing you were thinking. Haruto, stationed near the wall, shouted to the two of them that it was thin, so they could smash through and push forward. Mina stepped up to him and demanded, which way are we going, as they all headed straight over. Do they climb back up toward the entrance, or dive straight to the deepest floor and take the dungeon head-on? Karen yanked open the map, hunting for some secret way to crawl from the deepest floor straight to the exit, only this was an uncharted difficulty 7 dungeon, and nobody has any clue what kind of danger is waiting down below. But with monsters like Rydell lurking around, everyone knows they're already dug in deep, so sure, charging the boss might shave off time, yet since they weren't rushing, Karen pushed for a smarter play, go straight for the entrance. But Haruto snapped back, no way, he wants a straight-up dungeon clear. Since they can't lean on the kingdom anymore, they'll have to chase those so-called dungeon-clearing treasures. This could get deadly, so are they all going to follow him into the danger? He fidgeted in place, bracing for impact, sure they were about to slam the door on him. Mina didn't even hesitate, she nodded and agreed instantly. I mean, she's his familiar, right? Come on, how many times does Karen have to repeat herself? If she turns back, she's stuck by herself, so she grabs on and follows him to the very end. So yeah, go storm that dungeon and take it down. Back at the royal palace, the rogues hauled Yohei up for praise, and they made sure he knew he crushed it. But Yohei wasn't okay with any of it, because the situation he's stuck in right now is brutal. After they wiped out Haruto and the rest, everyone stares at him like he's a murderer with blood on his hands. Akamoto sat there in silence, adjusted his glasses, and finally, everything from the expedition day clicked into place. So why's he blurting all this to him? That's because he's the one who sets the whole class vibe, and the rogues wanted him to back that poor main character wannabe. The hero tore off the chains and handed their classmates their freedom. They can't just let a dangerous hero full of people run wild, so if Haruto is the reason they've been trapped inside the royal palace, does that mean he's finally letting them go now? Nakamoto pushed his glasses back into place, narrowed his eyes at the rogues, and snapped. Was Mina and the others getting dragged into this part of the plan? No way he'd just call out Karen like that, too. Rogue snapped, swore it was nothing, and brushed it off like it didn't matter at all so. Since Mina got hit way too hard by the taming, and Karen had nothing special to offer either, it felt downright cruel, especially to Felia, who was heartbroken that those three vanished, because she's the kind of girl who always cares. Because if a hero can't help the kingdom, their life is nothing, just small talk, since they're foreigners, and Akamoto's eyes went wide. So yeah, if they don't want to end up like Hatuto, they've got to prove they're worth something, but the question burns in him anyway. Are Haruto and the others really dead? Since all they watched was them disappear, it's totally possible they're still alive. Then the rogues cut him off, sipping his tea like they had all the time in the world, and laughing that it couldn't be true. That wicked little magic tool doesn't just erase, it reads your target's power, and then yanks them straight into a dungeon floor no one can beat. So yeah, maybe even before the 20th floor. Just to make it crystal clear, the royal tomb goes all the way up to 25 floors total. Haruto's regal was a monster from the 7th floor, and once you're below that, its power spikes by 30% every single level, so by the time you hit the 20th floor, they'd be 30 times stronger than Rai, and then you throw in countless monsters. Survival is basically a fantasy. Akamoto snapped back that Haruto had the tame skill, so even the deadliest monsters could become his familiars if he used it. Rogues only laughed like it was all a joke. He fretted nonstop until he finally reassured them. Tame won't work if the power gap gets too huge, so when Akamoto heard that heavy worry just melted away. Seike watched, amazed as Haruto forged control over every single monster they ran into. Karen whipped around to stare at the monsters chasing them, and yep, he'd gotten way more used to them than before. They'd already climbed past 3 more floors, but Haruto still wore a sour, dissatisfied look, so Mina had to ask, what's wrong? Honestly, in sheer raw power, these guys were already way stronger than them before they even stepped into the dungeon. But now that they've been tamed, Rai, Rito, and Mina are straight up stronger. Like, whoa, and it's weird as hell. The tame boost doesn't hit everyone the same. Karen thought it through and snapped to a conclusion. It had to be about closeness. He'd named Rai and Rito himself, but he was too busy to name the others, and that's why they weren't enhanced nearly as hard. So yeah, Mina was the one who got the biggest power jump, and she immediately got all rattled, teasing back like, wait, what's happening? While insisting she definitely didn't get stronger. Not a chance. Karen just grinned like she knew everything and proved it, because if Mina's stronger, Haruto has to be stronger too. Then Haruto butted in with some one-sided teasing, shrugging it off like, hey, being stronger means it's a good thing, right? Alright, this is where things get real. Right in front of them loomed a massive, menacing double door, the entrance to the boss chamber. Even so, the document warned him that a boss is waiting before you ever reach the bottom floor. It's the one brutal hurdle you've got to smash through to reach the dungeon's exit. Nina could feel a terrifying power surging inside her, and she insisted they get out, because the one with those pitiful levels was just too risky, and Haruto agreed fast, not wanting anyone to get hurt for no reason. Karen cheered, leaning on Haruto's familiars like it was no big deal, and honestly, she looked weirdly thrilled to be stuck babysitting. Haruto shot her a look and told her to wait with the others, and Karen immediately puffed up into a pout. She sprang up and swore, I was just messing around, then said she'd help too, right as Haruto opened his mouth to object. Karen shoved a potion into his hands, made from the rare stuff they'd hauled in on their journey. This thing boosts stamina, endurance, mental stability, muscle strength, and magic power all at once, so they'd better drink it before the chance slips away. Fighting isn't the only way to help, and Haruto nodded, then he grabbed the potions and went. Which he and Mina chugged, then gushed thanks to Karen. It tastes absolutely disgusting, but somehow it still gets the job done. Once they reached the bridge at the halfway point, the scenery flipped on its head in an instant. Haruto scanned the room, completely stunned, trying to figure out what on earth was happening. Meanwhile, Mina stared upward, stunned beyond belief at what was unfolding in front of her. Suddenly, the ground buckled with a violent rumble, and a hard gust of wind whipped past them like something had just slammed down right in front of their faces. It was a dragon Karen who stayed behind, holding the line. He saw them disappear out of nowhere, gone in a blink. She can only pray they're all safe and okay. Haruto went headfirst to try and break the dragon's will, but it still didn't stand a chance against a monster that strong. The dragon roared and they got knocked backward midair, crashing hard onto the ground. Right when the dragon struck to finish them off, Rai and Raidao yanked them out of there before it could land the blow. Crouched behind a rock, I watched the dragon rip through everything in a violent frenzy. Was that really the power of a dragon? Mina blurted, "So what now?" and Haruto shot back, "I'll go tame again, just to buy us some time." Mina snapped that it failed last time, so why gamble again? But Haruto wouldn't back down and said there was a different way. Mina was already about to argue back when he cut in. But Haruto's pleading voice pulled her in, and she moved exactly how he asked. She climbed onto Rito and launched herself at the dragon, desperate to snatch its attention. She gave Haruto a sharp nod. He spun back to the dragon and slipped out of the way as its breath came roaring past. This could be the very first time Mina is actually being trusted with Haruto's hopes. When she was little, it was always him she leaned on, but as she grew up, she got stronger than Haruto, and that gap between them kept widening. That's why she was so fed up, because she couldn't get any stronger, and that one word alone is making her snap. She hurled a fire-scaled dragon worm, then blasted it straight toward the dragon. Haruto sprinted to the side, unleashing his skill in a flash. Gilligan sets out to tame that dragon once and for all. Locked eyes with it. Then bam, he got yanked into a pitch-black void. He spun around as a voice cut in, saying tame is a contract. If he can't shove it into something he knows, he'll talk it, bargain it, and bend it until it feels just like home. Haruto swallowed hard and nodded, saying yeah, he could feel it the very first time it struck. A razor-sharp mind and a burning need to make it all count. So yeah, he's asking her to become his familiar, and he'll grant her wish in return, and she already gets how dangerous his talent is, thanks to what he showed her through Tame. And somehow this feels like fate calling his name, so now he has to prove to her that he can turn it into something real. Haruto jolted back to reality. Right when the dragon vanished, Mina snapped her head left and right, totally lost, like she couldn't believe what she just saw. So Haruto shouted up from below and told her the fight was done, over, finished, gone. She hurried back down and demanded to know what he meant by that. The door burst open, and in a split second, they were ripped right back to the bridge. Karen led them into the boss chamber, her eyes darting like, "Please tell me there's treasure, or at least something we can use." Then fear hit her like a wave, and she clung to Haruto for dear life, pointing up at a towering, humongous female dragon that. They finally ripped open the truth. The dragon they'd been battling revealed her real form and stepped forward like a nightmare with a name, the holy dragon, Mephals. Mina heard her name in a lecture. Wait, is she the hero dragon who stopped that calamity? So why is a legend like her here? Cephalus shot them a furious glare, insisting it was all their foolish doing. Truth is, a hero from long ago slammed her away and sealed her inside this land. And just like that, her power crumbled too, so they couldn't stop asking, why would a so-called hero dragon get sealed by a hero? Isn't the whole point of a hero to take on calamities? That's exactly it, so they pulled in countless more heroes. But in all these 1,000 years, calamity has only struck 3 times. Mina snapped back that it couldn't be true, so many heroes have already been summoned. Then she said the real kicker, Mephiles has no clue why the people of this world keep pulling unnecessary summons. If there's no real calamity on the horizon, they grab some random opponent, swagger in like the end of the world, and boom, the heroes either think they're battling a calamity for real or even seal an enemy that just showed up. So that means Mephiles isn't just a threat, he's a victim too, and Karen's heart clenched when a sudden memory hit her. They said heroes can go back to their original world by crushing a calamity, right? Then how are they ever supposed to return? Haruto's stuck on one thing, that calamity claim was a lie from the prince, and that prince might be the enemy. So Haruto's hunting for more power, because if the prince is waiting to strike, they can't afford to lose. That's why they're going to tame the holy dragon, Mephiles. Mina snapped, asking if he was really sure, because he looked like he was fighting for his life even against that phony earlier. Mephiles just smirked. She did it because she swore she could, if he finally undid her seal. Karen grilled Haruto for a way to undo the seal, then crushed the moment when he admitted he had no clue, but hinted there was one shot. Mephiles might claw back enough power to shatter it if someone tamed him and used that to strengthen him. Mephiles pushed him on and wouldn't let up. Haruto fired up his tame skill, desperate to claim her as his familiar. Then it all hit at once. His vision went dark and he blacked out. He didn't wake up until Karen handed him that stimulant, because Mephiles' power was so brutal it smashed him into unconsciousness. And because of that, he must have unlocked insane power. Haruto can feel this insane power surging through him, like it's about to blow the world apart. But no matter how hard he pushed, Mephiles still couldn't pour out enough power to shatter her seal. Haruto threw out an apology and Mephiles waved it off. It's fine, there's still a shot. If Haruto gets stronger, Mephiles promised her power will rise with him too, like it always works. So yeah, he needs to level up. Get out of here and rush towards somewhere better. Don't waste another second. Paradise is a dungeon packed with monster kings, and once you step in, you've found a jackpot of raw power. Paradise is a nightmare at level 9. The calamity from 200 years ago, Gu, is sealed deep down, still trapped and waiting. If she starts remembering, humans rate dungeons on a grim scale from 1 to 10. For reference, if they didn't fight her at all, this place would have been a 6. Nah, more like an 8. Karen wanted to bail immediately, but Mephiles snapped that they needed to hurry because Gu's seal is about to crack. Once they set him free, the whole continent will be slammed back into the path of destruction, and Haruto couldn't understand why it was happening. And she told him the magic tools were built to lure monsters right beneath the monster's seal, so the creatures that gathered would drain his magical power and crush the calamity's strength from the inside. But then he started draining magical power straight out of the monsters. Power surged through him fast, and soon that seal is going to snap open. Alright, Haruto figured it was smarter to go snatch back those magic tools, and Mephiles nodded in agreement, telling him to run and do it. Then she added the real kicker. While he's at it, he should tame the monsters they've collected to power himself up, like 2 birds, 1 strike. And honestly, she was right. But Haruto's stomach dropped at the thought of that 9-level difficulty. Mephiles just cackled and told him to relax, because if she was truly in her prime, that kind of difficulty wouldn't even matter. Still, those guys looked completely sketchy with that beat-up equipment. So she handed them brand new gear and… Meanwhile, Yohei and the crew kept mowing through dungeons, one victory after another. He tore through monster after monster, laughing like he'd found a joke in their pitiful strength. Akimoto grabbed his shoulder and ordered him to take a short break since everyone was wiped out, but Yohei shrugged him off and lunged ahead to crush more monsters, ignoring the exhaustion and injuries around him, because all he cared about was conquering the dungeon. Once they finally crashed into the boss chamber and tore the boss monster down, Akimoto rocketed straight into the ceiling, blasting past it while Philia leaned in and told them they were hearing rumors of a special squad of heroes, Yohei and Akimoto included, about to go take on a higher-level dungeon. Akimoto demanded, "Is this even safe? Since the last one was just difficulty 3, yet now they're getting tossed straight into a totally uncharted difficulty 5 dungeon." Yohei playfully smacked his back, teasing him for being scared, telling him everything's going to be okay, and that the kingdom will back them up with full support. So yeah, now it's time to unleash the hero's power beyond home, and crushing a brutal, unknown dungeon is the ultimate flex, because once they clear it, their legend will boom across the whole continent. Akimoto looked absolutely certain about it. They swore they had no choice, right as the monster popped up behind him and the ceiling crashed down, crushing it in an instant. Turns out he hit the ceiling earlier because he sensed this exact mess was coming. Yohei's getting stronger day by day, and Akimoto's precognition is holding longer than ever, so yeah, these two are monsters even by hero standards, and Yohei just smirks like he's got it, telling Philia to leave it to them. Even if some brutal calamity's waiting in that dungeon, they're going to wipe it out for sure. Meanwhile, Haruto and the others were halfway through. At last, they stormed into Cask, the town sitting right at the foot of Paradise. To everyone's surprise, the place buzzed with life, adventurers everywhere, chasing riches like Paradise was handing out fortunes for free. The dungeon's rewards were downright insane, so it was impossible not to see why people would gamble their lives just to chase that prize. And Paradise is built so the closer they get to the demon on the final floor, the crazier the monsters ramp up, turning it into the ultimate strength test. Sure, it still doesn't help, because they're sprinting straight for the final floor to grab the magical tools that could weaken the demon seal. Good news, while they were ready to fight, they didn't have to stress, because they'd powered up too with brand new gear. Right then a girl came rushing up, asking if they were adventurers, and If they've got nowhere to sleep yet, don't panic. She already knows the perfect stop, Shoyute. Haruto leaned in and asked if she worked here. Bingo, it was Lisa, an in-worker, and now they're left wondering, so what exactly does she say? Mina's face lit up when they talked about extra service, and her thoughts instantly went way too far. Then Lisa cleared it up fast. It was just an extra dish thrown in with dinner, and Haruto couldn't help but find that offer dangerously tempting. All right, it's decided. She'll march them back to the inn. Karen let out a tired sigh at Mina, and the second Mina caught her glare. Mina asked, "What's wrong?" Karen dragged it out and teased Mina for being so prudish, and Mina's face instantly flamed with embarrassment. She swore it was all just a misunderstanding, but Karen wasn't buying it for a second. Meanwhile, Lisa snapped at the two of them to hurry, so Karen rushed up and skipped right over, leaving Mina back there, still in shock that she'd been branded a prude. And when they finally reached the end, they couldn't believe it. Just one lone room was all they were offered. The innkeeper rushed out an apology. Every bed was already taken, and Lisa figured sharing a room was totally fine since they were all in the same party anyway, especially after what Karen said earlier. Mina snapped that there was zero chance she'd ever agree to that. No way, not even a little. Then she spun around and stormed off, calling them over for a meal. Meanwhile, Haruto just stood there, totally stunned, like he couldn't figure out what hit her. Even so, they still trailed right behind her. They took their seats at the table and stared in awe at the plates of food laid out in front of them, and ripped into the digging. Their tears spilled down as they savored every last bite. Then Lisa and the other innkeeper got hit with a surprise. She demanded to know what was wrong, and Haruto snapped back that the trouble was because they were just too good. Lately, all they've gotten is dry, flavorless bread that somehow won't spoil, pretty much the only good thing about it, yet Karen still swore it tasted amazing, even without comparing it to anything else. No wonder the place is packed. Lisa shot back her thanks and said the truth. The town is booming right now, and everyone's rushing in. The heroes are rolling in, along with some royal troublemakers, too. Everyone's been buzzing about them, and now every soul wants a peek. Word is they just cleared an uncharted shadow dungeon, and if they keep that momentum rolling, paradise might be next. Back in their room, the three just stared at each other, frantic, because they had no clue what to do next. So the big question was, should they bail on town right now? But Haruto snapped, no, this isn't the move. They've still got a few days before they reach their destination, so they'd better squeeze every second out of it, and Mina nodded hard in agreement. First, they have to tame monsters and push paradise to get stronger. Then they need to hunt down the magical tool buried deep inside, the one that's weakening the demon's seal. Karen wanted the heroes to deal with it, but Haruto hesitated, because if the townspeople don't even realize a demon is sealed inside paradise, what chance do the royals have of knowing about the magical tool? Mina's biggest nightmare, someone sparks that demon halfway through, because Yohei, the would-be hero, just might do exactly that, and on top of that it's a level 9 nightmare from the start, so they probably won't even reach the deepest floor, but the real problem is. Don't you think they should start freaking out about how they're gonna sleep? Trying to slam the brakes on the conversation and flip the topic. Mina leaned in and demanded to know how Rai and the rest were holding up. Haruto shut his eyes and called out to his familiars, because they're already waiting just beyond the nearby forest, and nothing seems off. Besides, they used to sleep in dungeons that were way more dangerous than any forest. Karen asked if he could tell what they were doing right now, and Haruto admitted he could sort of feel if they're safe, like it's straight up part of a Tamer's power, the kind parents everywhere would kill to get. Hold up, you're missing the whole point. Karen slammed the table and demanded to know what they were supposed to do. There were 3 of them, but only 2 beds. Haruto figured she and Mina could use them, and that he'd just crash on the floor. They both shot that idea down right away, because he needed real rest if their party was going to stay standing. He's slept in brutal dungeon misery before, so that floor doesn't even faze him. But there's zero chance he's beating these 2 in an argument. Karen said, I'll crash on the floor. I always rest like that during fights, but Mina snapped back, swearing she'd be the one on the floor because she's way tougher and can take it. Haruto shot his hand up to speak, and if we're playing by that logic, then he's the one who should have ended up on the floor. But the 2 of them shut his idea down right away, and suddenly he had no choice left. Karen insisted Mina lie down on the bed, because Mina was the familiar after all, and Mina finally gave in, but Karen still had to rest, since she couldn't risk messing up her delicate potion mixing. If they slide the beds together, they can cram in 3 people. Still, confusion swarmed her mind and left her speechless. Haruto didn't fight back. She still went along with whatever they demanded, and then got stuck right there between them. He demanded to know, can you really sleep like this? Mina cut him off on the spot. insisting they could do it for sure. Karen let out a shaky chuckle, and the nerves hit hard. She was almost certain they could hear her heartbeat thundering in her chest. Honestly, they could, and that scared me. Haruto can't even tell if that heartbeat is his or someone else's. Suddenly, Mina lunged in and clutched his sleeve. Haruto muttered that he was drifting way too far that way and would make Karen uncomfortable, but Karen just laughed it off. It's fine. After all, she was smaller, so she didn't mind if Haruto edged closer. Mina refused, and he instantly knew what she was saying, didn't he? Karen pushed back hard, insisting they use the space smartly, and she delivered it with a playful, teasing tone. Haruto clenched his teeth, freaking out as he demanded why he was stuck right in the middle of it, and swore it was all his rock-paper-scissors magic that caused it. 3 of them jolted upright, cheeks blazing red. Before he finally stepped into the forest, Karen snapped her gaze around the room, scanning for what came next. Haruto, wondering where Rai and the others had vanished to, shouted for them, so they'd show up any minute. Karen pressed him on what that meant, and he said, if he calls to them in his mind, they'll answer, unless he's too far away for the message to reach. Karen blinked, impressed, and asked if he can even hear his familiar's thoughts, and Mina immediately started worrying. But she let out a breath of relief when Haruto said he couldn't, at least, not nearly that well. Soon his familiars showed up, but they didn't come alone. Monsters of every kind were tangled in their ranks. Riku launched off the edge, leapt through the air, and raced right into Haruto's arms for a tight hug. Shocked beyond words, he watched as tons of monsters actually showed up to his call. Looks like these forest monsters are all in on getting stronger by being tamed. Karen couldn't believe it when they actually agreed to let Haruto become their master, probably because they're just trying to stay safe in a spot crawling with adventurers hunting herbs. But shouldn't he move right now? If a horde like this rolls in, the town is going to dispatch a subjugation squad. She's not wrong. So Haruto shot his hand up and unleashed his tame skill on them. It dragged on for a while because there were just so many of them. And once it was over, Haruto collapsed, utterly drained and spent. Karen spun toward the monster in pure confusion, like, wait, it's still out there and there's only one left. It's a white dragon, and she's stunned, because she never thought dragons could be this small. It's ridiculously cute. Haruto slammed his skill into the dragon, and power surged through him like a storm, while Mina watched it all unfold. That one had the most insane potential of every monster he tamed today. Turns out it's still a dragon, even if it's tiny, and Karen pushes him to name it, so Haruto jumps on the idea and calls it Lulu. The dragon dropped into a bow, and then, right before everyone's eyes, wings burst out of its back. Then it lunged and sank its teeth right into Haruto's hood. It shot up with Haruto hanging from its mouth, and Haruto immediately freaked out, begging Lulu to let him go because it was way too dangerous. Lulu, being the good, obedient dragon she is, dropped him, and Haruto braced for the worst. A fall. But no, he didn't just land. He started floating, hovering above the town, staring down at the whole place like it was a whole new world, stunned by every last bit of scenery. Suddenly, it felt like something inside him was being ripped in half. That killing intent is screaming off him, and it's rising straight out of paradise. The 3 of them marched straight to the guild, because if they wanted to step into that dungeon, they had to register as adventurers first. They swear kingdom-backed heroes don't have to worry about it, so Mina's left wondering if registering will tip the kingdom off about them, but the guild's supposedly independent, so it should be safe, and besides, even the heroes' detailed records haven't been aired to the public. Unless they wanted to flip back into fugitives again, because the only reason they had a guild lecture in the first place was to avoid going down for illegally entering a dungeon. Still, Haruto shoved them along and demanded they move fast, because that demon seal could snap at any second. The old woman behind the front desk sized them up like real adventurers, then stamped their guild cards and sent them on their way. Karen couldn't believe it. Once they started, it was almost effortless, just paperwork after paperwork, no test, no trap, and the old woman backed it up hard. She said she didn't need anything extra because she could feel the massive aura blasting off Mina and Haruto. But if you're headed for paradise, watch your step. High-level monsters have been popping up even in the shallow zones lately. Haruto was right, so they'd better sprint and grab that magic tool before it slips away, and if they really want the scoop on paradise, the old woman said to go find an informant. They listened up, then hunted down an old man. He wouldn't talk unless they handed over 3 copper coins as the price for the info. Don't kid yourself, he's not some charity guy, and there's no chance he's handing out that info for free. After he grabbed the money, they demanded details. Did he have the paradise map or monster intel? No, they wanted something way crazier, the deeper areas. If that was the case, they'd have to pay more, so Haruto flashed a gold coin. The old man suddenly halted him and warned him, "Don't go waving those gold coins around like you're asking for trouble." Yeah, they didn't look like the kind to get bullied by some regular adventurer, but you know what they say, better safe than sorry. Then he swallowed his pride and apologized, because nobody ever reached those deeper areas. He had zero info to share, but if they could pull it off, they should come back and sell him what they learned because he'd pay them top dollar. And just like that, they walked away with absolutely nothing solid to show for it. At least they finally had a map of the cleared zones, so yeah, that helped a little, and Karen shot back, "Are we going straight into paradise?" But honestly, Haruto's mana was all but drained after that massive taming this morning, so if they're going, he wants to be at full power. Maybe tomorrow. Karen suggested they hit the town and explore a bit. They're stuck in a whole new world, so they better cram it full of wild memories while they still can. Haruto and Mina spin toward each other, then break into matching smiles as they agree. They darted into every shop they spotted along the way, browsing whatever caught their eye, then peered around, looked. They eyed the goods like a kid in a candy store, then started needling each other here and there. They hauled out the fresh outfits and tried them on, one after another. They grabbed a bunch of stuff that totally caught their eye. Karen couldn't wipe the smile off her face after that purchase, and once they got back to the inn, she couldn't wait to start brewing some top-tier potions, while Haruto leaned in like, "Do you think they'll taste even better?" Karen just shot back, "Maybe, if you keep taming like that," and as they cut past the corner, they spotted a juicy poster for a hot spring and instantly decided to hit the road. Karen's eyes sparkled with pure excitement. This was her very first open-air bath, and Mina, same exact thrill all over her face. While the girls were busy laughing in the hot spring, Haruto got boxed in inside the men's bath, random guys circling him, grilling him like, "Where are you from?" since they'd never seen him around. You came expecting cute girls soaking, but you got dudes trying to rizz you up instead. In the Elman Kingdom, Rogues' father, King Hills, hauled him in and praised him to the skies for conquering the Shadow Dungeon. Rogues dropped to one knee, swearing it was all because of the heroes, so powerful they had to be standing among the best on the whole continent. Good, now they have to reward the Shadow Raid crew, Yohei, Akamoto, and Magumi, and soon they'll find out exactly what the calamity turns into. King Hills got a shot at trapping the heroes here, yet they don't even realize what kind of calamity is really coming, and the other nations are already lining up to blast them for stacking up the military. The rogues leaned in and told him, "Don't sweat it, we already checked it out. This time the trouble isn't small, it's the demon ogre, and the ancient seal from 200 years ago is starting to come apart." His revelation ripped through the room and made the other nobles gasp in pure shock. King Hills stared, doubtful, then Rogues shot back a firm, straight-up yes. No one should have known where the demon ogre's seal was, because the heroes who tried to stop it died on the spot, and the clues vanished with them, yet the rogues swore to him they already had a real lead. King Hills stepped in and warned him to slow down, because a crushing calamity was coming, and he knew he had a habit of rushing headfirst. The rogues nodded politely, but inside his mind, he was already tearing into his father for being way too timid. Then he snapped around and started rallying everyone to crush the demon ogre, but right before he took another step, his father grabbed him and stopped him. He set his sights on shattering the seal and dragging it under his control. No way. He can only reinforce it, not break it, and the rogue snapped his tongue as he muttered. And they told him straight up, they can't call heroes this often, so they've got to hit now, while they still have the power. King Hills was mid-protest when the rogues cut him off and snapped, resealing it is impossible from the start. To reseal the calamity, they've gotta get the power from a holy attribute hero. But Megumi's in no shape to unleash her powers right now. When King Hills demanded the reason, the rogues shoved Felia forward and told her to speak up, because they knew the Shadow Raid crew was made of 80 fighters, heroes and the castle's elites included. Out of all of them, just 55 made it back. Megumi could heal wounds, so every death her team suffered felt like it landed on her shoulders, crushing her both in body and in mind. That made King Hill let out a heavy sigh. Heroes could be so fragile. Right then, a person burst into the throne room and said they likely came from a peaceful world, and honestly, it wasn't a bad thing at all. It's Victor, the first prince, and when King Hill sees him, shock hits hard, so he blurts, "Are you okay?" Victor shot back that he was feeling great, so he figured, why not show up to the meeting for once? King Hills leaned in and demanded to know what I thought about the demon ogre. And Vic was convinced they had to just reinforce the seal, nothing more. Rogues demanded answers, but instead of explaining, Vic shot him a look like he was hiding a secret, then dropped the bomb that the demon ogre is sealed in paradise. Hill's king gasped in shock and demanded from Rogues if it was really true, and Rogues confirmed it. The moment the nobles heard paradise was close to the capital and cask, chaos exploded in every direction. Meanwhile, Rogues grilled Vic, "How'd you know?" And Vic just shrugged, saying that since Rogues were stuck tangled in politics, he figured he'd at least sniff out what was coming with the calamity. Vic knows it. Rogues worship the old hero, Raisel, but he's staring at a truth no one wants to admit. Today's heroes aren't cut from the same cloth. 50 years have already slammed by since he died. He wiped out the demon race, the demon ogre's own kin, then sealed the evil dragon away again, and honestly, his achievements were beyond counting. Sure, he could have carved up that demon ogre, but does Vic honestly think today's heroes could pull it off too? His words hit like a spark, and the rogue's anger simmered as fists tightened in silence. King Hills seethed with disappointment, because Magumi, the holy-type hero, was stuck bedridden. Victor leaned in and asked if he could take responsibility for her, because he'd spent more time bedridden than anyone, so he swore he could help her heal. And the knights felt a wave of relief hit them as they heard that. While they had no clue, Rogues clenched his teeth with rage, furious that his cowardly brother, who tossed his claim to the throne after falling ill, was suddenly showing up. He fixed the nobles with a burning glare, then, when Victor came into view, an eerie smile tugged at his lips. He's got to grab more power and earn his place, no doubt about it. So he had no choice. He'd have to go to paradise, and it couldn't wait. At the same time, Haruta sat by the window while Karen and Mina crashed asleep on the bed, because tomorrow, they're taking off for paradise. The very next day, all three showed up right at the gates of paradise, staring it down like it was about to crack. And they stared in awe at the crowd, stalls everywhere, the whole place buzzing like a full-on festival. Lisa spotted them instantly and practically lit up as she greeted them. They whipped their heads toward her, and Haruto demanded why she was there, like she didn't have a pretty good reason for being there, right on the job. Paradise is a goldmine of opportunities. Adventurers show up, but so do thousands of tourists just to soak it all in, and that's why she's hustling away with a souvenir shop right for them. Then she leaned in and asked if they wanted to grab something too, waving a cool figurine of Magumi, Akamoto, and Yohei. The moment they saw those familiar faces, all three froze in shock. But Lisa mistook them for fans and practically pushed them to buy one, yet her sales pitch flopped hard because they bolted as fast as their legs could carry them. At the dungeon entrance, they saw a group of adventurers raging in full view because the guard shut them down and wouldn't let them pass, claiming they were far too weak. The guard leaned in and told them, "Climb your guild rank first, then come back and try again." The party had no choice but to stomp off in a fury, furious at every step. Mina knew this was trouble. She and the others had barely joined the guild, so nobody's ranked up yet. Haruto, though, was ready for exactly this kind of mess, so he split Rai and the rest onto separate paths into paradise. And if things go bad, they'll do the same again. The second they stepped up to the guard, the pressure hit. He demanded their guild cards, and they fumbled them over with shaky, anxious faces and just like that, the guard didn't stop them. He straight up let them in, way past their wildest expectations. Haruta looked totally lost and asked what was going on with their rank, and the guard snapped back that rank was only one tiny sign among many. There's zero reason to turn away clearly capable adventurers, just make sure they don't get careless. Because every adventurer who dives into the deepest depths of paradise vanishes for good, none ever return. The moment they stepped inside, Haruto felt the dungeon's pure malice hit like a punch, snapped them to hurry, because they still had to grab the magical tool that weakens the demon's seal and tame the monsters in paradise before it was too late. Meanwhile, Akamoto, who'd stepped into paradise alongside Yohei and the rogues, turned around and demanded, "What's the hurry, and why in the world did rogues drag us here?" Cask's victory parade isn't happening for days yet, and the other heroes still haven't shown up, so Rogue's landing felt way too easy, especially since the Shadow Dungeon was totally uncharted. They couldn't believe he'd say that, after so many lives had been wiped out in that dungeon. The rogues didn't even blink. They straight up said the ones who died were just dead weight. This time, they're rolling in with a tiny elite squad to smash paradise in a top-tier, nightmare-level dungeon, and because it's only one floor, they're confident it'll be over fast. This is how they blast their heroic name across the world. Yohei snapped into protest, demanding why they'd jump into yet another high-level dungeon after the Shadow Dungeon already made them famous enough, while Rogues clenched his jaw and swore that real heroes don't just stop there. There's a calamity locked away inside paradise, and it's just waiting to break free. Once they beat the calamity, they'll be able to go back to their original world. Right, that's what they're chasing. Akamoto figured they'd better stop winging it, prep smarter, and level up the other heroes first, because if this really is a calamity, they can't afford to be careless. He wasn't wrong. Rogues want to turn every one of them into a living legend. This time there are 27 heroes on the board, and if they all team up to crush the calamity, only the crew called heroes will be remembered. And he just can't live with it. Only the real heroes get to be etched into history. And they've got what it takes. Akamoto was seconds away from protesting. But before he could even finish, the rogue stepped in to cut him off, blaring that Haruto and the others were in paradise, and it left the two absolutely stunned. Apparently, the royal guard who was sent to scout the casks spotted them, so yeah, they cleared the royal tomb. Honestly, that's a feat so wild it'll blow your mind. Yohei couldn't wrap his head around it. They actually cleared the royal tomb, a nasty difficulty 7, which is even tougher than the shadow dungeon they'd already beat. And if Haruto and the others figure out they got set up, they're finished, because once everyone realizes the truth, they'll be done for, and that's probably why they never went back to the capital, and instead came here. Rogues wanted to snatch the calamity's power for themselves, and Akamoto couldn't shake the thought that they'd be cooking up revenge against the kingdom with it, though part of him still insisted they wouldn't go that far, but before he could even finish, rogue kids swooped in, grabbed them, and barked that they had to stop Haruto and the others, before their vengeance tore through the kingdom and left it in ruins. Rogue's eyes flared like a neon spell, hypnotizing the two in an instant. They followed his lead like puppets. He grinned, feeling pleased, and made up his mind to go. Just as they pushed through the forest, they collided with Rai and the rest of the crew. A brawl erupted so hard an explosion tore through the area. Haruto and the others spotted it from a distance, and he couldn't stop wondering what the heck was happening. Lulu showed up at the exact right moment and told him everything that was going on. Mina shot him a worried look and asked what was wrong, and Haruto told her it looked like Rai and the others were right in the middle of fighting off enemies. So they had to back them up, but right before they could take another step, Rogue's royal guards slam into them, blocking the path like a wall. The captain shoved his ear, and a tiny magic circle snapped into view, some kind of spell to talk, and he blurted to the rogues that they'd spotted Haruto's party. Rogue snapped for him to keep them stuck there, saying regrouping the Tamer and his familiars would turn everything into chaos. Then Haruto roared Rogue's name back in fury the moment he heard his voice. The royal guard even tipped him off. Yohei and Akamoto were coming with him, because right now they're gearing up to kill the calamity. Begged him to stay out of it. More and more people surged in, closing every escape route until they were boxed in like frightened mice. It wasn't just the royal guards, adventurers were there too, and Karen clocked something was wrong with them, but there wasn't time to dig deeper. Mina shoved Haruto forward and told him to go on ahead. And they'll make sure Rai and the others don't get through, right here. Karen nodded fast. Of course he's worried about them. Haruto was ready to argue. But Mina snapped in and reassured him, "We've got you, everything's gonna be fine." So he finally believed her, they were taking care of this. Hit by their words, Haruto bolted upward to escape. Just as the captain swung his spear to strike them, Mina blasted magic into the ground under him, freezing his charge in place. This is chaos waiting to explode, so they're going to smash them here first. Plus the captain already warned, don't get cocky. Yeah, they've gotten ridiculously powerful. Numbers always win, and just like that, more enemies burst out from above the trees. These guys can dig into even the deepest corners of paradise, and the royal guards hit even harder than that. Mina is doomed the moment that dead weight starts dragging her under. Karen's stomach dropped the moment the captain's words landed like they were aimed at her, but Mina yanked her into a tight hug and bragged that Karen's potions were top tier, crafted to crank their power to the max. She hurled fire skill and summoned the Titan worm. She scared the royal guards out of their wits, and then, right to his face, she bragged that it was totally awesome, didn't she? Mina shot her hand up, then slammed it down, and the fire erupted, swallowing the enemy's whole. Who crumpled in a single second. Turns out that army was completely worthless. All right, now it's time to head back to Haruto. She summoned the fire scale, then carved a message with Pegasus Worm to get it to Haruto in a flash. Meanwhile, Haruto barreled into the battlefield, where his familiars were trading blows with the rogues, and the first thing he saw was several of them crumpled on the ground. Ryan Rideout practically sprinted up to him, ready to spill every detail about what just happened. Seeing his injured familiars lit Haruto's anger on fire. He shot the question at them, and when Yohei looked totally lost, the whole moment hit a dead silence. He fired off the question again, this time shouting through clenched rage, and Yohei just smirked back, asking if the guy was blind and stupid. So tell me, who else could have pulled off something like that besides them? Akamoto adjusted his glasses, then barked, "Back up, jump back now." Right as they were about to move, a fire arrow screamed down to the exact spot they'd been standing a second ago. Mina's attack, aimed to burn them out, landed right beside Haruto, with Karen crashing in right next to them. She snapped a glare at the mess left behind, her familiar's condition hitting her like a slap, demanding they were ready for what their choices would unleash. That one simple question lit a fuse in Wanabe's head, and before he could stop himself, he erupted, shouting a warning not to get cocky. He lunged in with his sword, swearing he'd wipe them all out this time, and Haruto snarled, then unleashed every ounce of his power. With that, Rito sprang forward and slammed into Yohei with an all-out attack, who never stood a real chance. The person in the back couldn't stop staring at what they'd just seen, so even stacking this many defensive spells still isn't enough. Right then, Rai slammed into Akamoto and tore through him with lightning. He dropped in an instant, and rogues were left scrambling on their own. Even with Akamoto's future sight on his side, the attacks come in too damn fast, he just can't dodge them. The rogues realize something terrifying. The familiar's power is way stronger than before. Is it because the Tamer's close? Nope, he's Rai's familiar too, so even they freeze up before throwing a punch. Rogues just cackled as they stomped down on a collapsed familiar's head, spitting out their mockery at Rado for sacrificing one of his own kind, like he was nothing but a beast. And Haruto couldn't help but notice they looked oddly calm about it. But while he waited, rogues just swept the attention to Karen and demanded to hear what she thought. Yohei and Akamoto weren't just strong, they're basically monsters, two of the most powerful heroes from the past. Mina and Haruto got wiped out without breaking a sweat, like those familiars were made to erase them, and he could feel it. There was something stronger in the two of them than what they were admitting. But what about her? He can't sense a single real power in her, so there's no way she belongs here. Mina totally snapped, asking what the hell he was even talking about, then shot back that Karen was just pumping them up with potions, so why not hand Mina the potion and keep herself in the back? First place, do they even need potions? They're already monsters, so tell me, what were they using potions for if they're that strong? Rogues thrust his hand out, and his eyes blazed again, like he was trying to mesmerize Karen into stepping over, swearing her place wasn't with him anymore. They were stunned to see Karen out there alone, and they rushed to stop her before she could go any farther. Rogues menaced them into freezing, because she was right under his control now. If he gives the order, he can make her die. Because they still couldn't wrap their heads around his talent, he shut them up on the spot, making Karen spin around and bark without the slightest hesitation. Rogues cackled and told him to stay put and play nice until Haruto gathered enough magic to blast right through. Then Haruto's jaw clenched as panic slammed in, because if Rai's speed couldn't stop the moment before Rogues barked the order, what then? Rai's blade would be worthless once its identity was out, so they'd have to wipe the skill itself off the board, but how? Nina snapped her eyes to Haruto and the rogues, to tell him to tame Karen. Nobody knew what her roguish skill was, but she once dodged his move, back when he tried to lure her into his room. She just knows Tame can wipe out his technique, so she orders him to tame Karen before it's too late. Haruto froze for a second, because the thought of taming Karen felt like it could shatter everything between them, just like it did with Mina. Mina suddenly whacked his back, snapping him out of his spiral, and pleaded with him to do it right now, because there wasn't a single second to waste or hesitate. She leaned in and promised him, "It'll be fine, what matters most won't change." Haruto finally stomped down the stairs, trailing right after Karen. Rogue stared at him, asking if he'd completely lost it, then snapped, "Don't you dare move." Haruto already beat everyone to Karen, and used his skill to break her wild spirit and put her under his control. Thinking nothing had happened, the rogues cackled like maniacs. He'd already figured it out. If he dragged her under his control sooner, the taming spell wouldn't have taken, so he barked at Haruto to let Karen go, and right then, Karen's hand twitched. She snapped her head up, refusing it with a sharp, "I don't want to." Rogues froze in shock when he saw Karen snap back to normal, and Haruto and Mina finally exhaled, because their plan had worked. Rogues couldn't stomach what they were seeing. This was supposed to be impossible. "Don't control-type skills always go to whoever casts them first?" Haruto demanded, but Rogue only scoffed, flat out refusing to say what his skill even was. Karen didn't waste any time. She exposed his skill on the spot, the power to control someone's mind like it's nothing. A mind control technique. Yeah, the name already screams what it does, doesn't it? She let out a wicked little chuckle and pulled a potion from her sleeve, like she'd been copying the one Rai made, piece for piece. Only this time, she didn't brute force anything. She used her level 1 appraisal skill, checked the materials, and finished the whole thing clean. Still, he kept staring at it like yesterday's ingredients might betray him, like it might not actually work. and now all that doubt is laid bare. Haruto finally snaps into it. Those weird potions weren't random. They were hijacking people's minds with ruthless precision, and that broken cheat skill is the real problem. Mina should have been gentler, but it still isn't unstoppable. To mess with someone, those rogues would first have to sink their fingers into the one crack in their heart. Karen quickly apologized, totally rattled by Rogue's words, because yeah, she really does pale in power compared to everyone else. Mina pushed back, demanding to know what she was even saying, and Karen brightened up, saying they honestly needed her. Now she feels pumped up, like she's been tamed into something stronger, and from here on out, she's ready to be a legit game-changing asset. But that's not what Mina meant. Haruto cut in mid-conversation, blurted out his apology, and somehow everyone just got it. If he didn't say it, it wouldn't land. Karen then stepped up and promised she'd stay right there with him. But he never truly felt the same. This time, though, he'll finally say it out loud, how much fun she brings him, and how he wants her to stay by his side forever. Karen blushed. She spun around, shooting him a look like, what are you even saying? And yeah, he's not getting to keep her glued to his side forever, because she's got her own private life. Haruto cleared it up fast, saying that was just a figure of speech. But Karen couldn't hear a thing. She just kept blushing like crazy, and he looked so cool it was unreal. So is this what Tame does too? Yeah, it's definitely the effect. Fake it till you make it, I guess. Did they totally forget about the rogues already? Because that no-good mother trucker was stockpiling magic power, and then, right when it mattered most, he finally unleashed it to wipe them all out. Turns out I panicked for nothing. Haruto just cut that attack clean in half like it weighed nothing. Rogues stopped cold, dropping to their knees in shock. He couldn't believe he'd just lost. And then his full power strike got deflected like it was nothing, because the power gap was massive, and now he has to get stronger fast. Haruto strode up to the rogues, grinning like he'd already won, and declared that it was over. And then out of nowhere, a shadowy black figure slipped right between them. Every single one of them froze, staring in stunned silence. And that suffocating aura it was pouring out made the air feel heavy. No way is this dude a demon. It yanked its mouth open and blasted out a roaring wave of. A blanket of darkness slammed down over the entire forest. And out there too, among adventurers and tourists alike, they erupted into terrified screams. But just as they tried to bolt, the darkness surged into their bodies and swallowed everything. And just like that, they snapped into mindless puppets, only one mission burning in their heads: kill the hero. When Haruto cracked his eyes open. And just like that, the demon disappeared, gone from sight, like it never even existed. Karen froze, staring at what she'd just seen. Then a voice snapped in and told her it was the demon lord's miasma leaking out of the seal. And that's exactly how they got the power. Rogues teamed up with Yohei and Akamoto. He supercharged himself with the demon's power, blasting it all away. Yohei could feel power blazing through him, and for once they wouldn't get crushed by those familiars anymore. Still, Haruto couldn't help but wonder, are they really going to obey the demon lord, or are they here to take him down too? Yeah, that's true, but it doesn't matter anymore. Rogues shot his hand up, sending everyone else soaring into the sky, so it was just him and Haruto left behind. A burning urge claws through him. Nothing else matters but wiping every last one of them out. That's all he wants. Karen and Akamoto touched down deep in the woods, far from everyone else. Akamoto adjusted his glasses, and unlike Yohei, he wasn't the type to prey on the weak. But right now it feels like he's about to do it. Karen's smirk said it all, and maybe it was because he'd been asleep that he didn't even realize what was going on. But with Tame pushing her even further, she tore into the fight, unleashing her magic, the ice arrow, and locking onto Akamoto. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Mina snapped her head around, panicking that she had to regroup with everyone fast, while Yohei burst forward and lunged in to strike her. She snapped move and unleashed a fiery-scaled titan worm that lunged out to trap Yohei. He slashed her magic down with his blade, and right then, Akimoto caught the arrows Karen hurled at him. They had no idea how far their bodies could go with that tame stuff, but the demon lord's power was on a whole other level. Karen smirked, raised her hand, and right before the shot, slotted a synthesis magic circle into the fired ice arrow, so it instantly fused the mana in the air with the arrow through synthesis. And he transforms it into brand new magic, the compound version, Ice Lycian. Akamoto blasted it apart like he'd seen this moment coming, because the only way to beat Foresight is to strike so fast it smashes through reactions before anyone can respond. Karen tried to pull it off with a two-layered barrage. But this level didn't scare him for a second. Karen clenched her teeth. He blasted a whole storm of spells: ice bow, ice cannon, ice arrow, and even an ice tank. Akamoto slammed himself in front of them, blocked every single strike, and roared that it was pointless, because as long as foresight is backed by his raw power, nothing can land. She should just quit. But then his sentence got strangled mid-breath when he blurted, confused, "Wait, this barrage is just a setup." And just like that, something else was creeping up behind him. He clocked it fast, exactly like foresight promised. But it was already over. Karen hit the synthesis conversion, and the Ice Leaky Cherubit Carnival burst into action. If pushing didn't work, she didn't hesitate. She pushed harder, again and again, unleashing an ultra-hypersaturated barrage powered by mana boosted through Tame and synthesis. Akimoto blurted out in shock, but Karen had already turned and walked off, telling him to quit and be done with it. Didn't he see this coming too? Karen stormed off, and Akimoto got left behind, sealed inside that rabbit-like ice trap. Meanwhile, it looked like Mina was getting shoved back step by step, while Yohei pressed the fight hard. Despite her fire-scaled dragon worm, Yohei lunged in and slashed at her. She snapped up a fiery block to stop his sword cold. Yohei let out a sharp laugh, mocking that she was way too slow. Then Mina vanished without warning, came back above him in a flash, and landed with fire skill like a punchline from the sky. Pegasus War II. Yohei shot a smug look upward and snapped his guard into place, just in time to block her strike. He snapped his sword up to block the attack, laughing like her strike was nothing. They touched back down on the ground, and Yohei just mocked her magic in front of her. Giants smash through everything with raw strength, but their defenses crumble. Dragons shrug off attacks like nothing, yet can't keep up in a chase, and horses fly across the battlefield with speed, only to fall short on sheer power. Being a small fry is brutal. She had to keep swapping tricks nonstop just to crank up her specs and stay in the game, and when he mocked her, Mina brushed it off and called out what she was thinking. Using all of them just to stall their party. That tells me the Demon Lord isn't ready to revive. Am I right? Yohei was about to say something. When Mina clocked him with a punch, she just smirked, like she knew the secret. And that meant they didn't have to hold back any mana against the Demon Lord anymore. Yohei clenched his teeth and he snapped his blade up and parried every hit Mina threw at him. So what if she cranked up her power? A horse is still a horse, and no matter what, she just didn't have the defense to stop him. That's right, she's going all in now. She shifts into the five-tailed Trinity form. Yohei couldn't believe it. He had gotten stronger with the Demon Lord's power, yet he kept losing, so he staggered back and demanded answers, because the truth was staring him right in the face. She's the strongest familiar for a reason. She blasted Yohei with an even deadlier fire, and he immediately crumpled and passed out. Back at Rogues and Haruto, the rogue seethed with raw frustration and cursed up a storm at. Even the Demon Lord's power couldn't hide just how wildly different they were. Rage burst from him as he unleashed endless attacks, but Haruto just shrugged them off. Now, this time they're finishing it. Rogue smirked in confidence, and then, right out of the smoke, people surged forward to seize Haruto. These adventurers hailed from paradise, but the Demon Lord's miasma sank into them like a curse. He froze the moment he spotted Lisa. Then he whipped around at the rogues who jeered, asking if this was somebody he knew, just like he'd guessed. The Demon Lord's miasma has turned them feral, and mind control has them hunting him down, the same fate waiting for the hundreds of humans around paradise. So now the big question hits. Does he stop, tame them, and try to save them too? But Haruto alone didn't look like enough in his eyes, and when Haruto asked if he'd forgotten what he said earlier, the rogue's grin cracked on the spot. And with the help of his familiars, Rai and Rito, he clamped down on the adventurers and held them in check. Just like he said, Haruto's the tamer, so he's not alone. Sure, right, because he's about to swing in and Sung Jinwoo your ass. Rogues jeered, yeah, so what if hundreds were mind-controlled? 2 familiars couldn't possibly be enough. Then Haruto snapped back, boasting that he already had hundreds of tamed familiars sitting in the royal tomb, paradise, and all around it. He listened to his words and then commanded his familiars to take the crowd out, cleanly, without a single injury. Luckily for him, those guys had no chance against his familiars, so he should wipe the floor with them without breaking a sweat. Haruto leaped to his feet and screamed that it was over. Rogues scrambled to strike back, but the moment was already crashing down on them. Haruto had already smashed a kick into him. Their party stormed back to the royal palace to round up the rogues, Yohei and Akimoto included. King Hill leaned in and asked the rogues if they had anything to say about what just happened. He fired back, yeah, that's what I did, and then threw out a pathetic excuse. He only tried to stop Haruto's plan to snatch the power of the calamity by claiming he'd do the killing himself. He snapped his mind control power on, then Karen smirked and cut him down, saying the whole crowd had already built resistance to it thanks to alchemical drugs. King Hills bowed and apologized for his foolish son messing things up, but Haruto waved it off. It's okay, he said. we got what we came for anyway. To snatch the magical artifact that's draining the Calamity Seal and finally tame the monster's swarming paradise. King Hills went wide-eyed at that, and Haruto snapped back. This whole thing was meant to lure monsters and force them to soak up the Calamity's magic, but the Calamity flipped the script, stole their magic instead, and pumped itself back up to shatter its seal, and that's exactly why the miasma started spilling out. Vic thanked Haruto for handling it, praising his swift move. Thanks to him, everyone hit by the miasma snapped back to normal with no lasting damage, and then Vic noticed Haruto's startled face as he stammered. Victor swallowed his pride, apologized fast, and then finally came clean, introducing himself as Rogue's older brother. They were totally baffled. Didn't Rogues used to be the first prince? Rogue snapped back that his older brother, Vic, had renounced the throne because of sickness, so Rogue stepped in and became the first prince. Like he finally understood what Rogues was saying, Vic knit his brows, lined in, and called his name in a gentle whisper. But the Rogues simply averted their eyes, and that's when Haruto finally got it, why they were so desperate to kill the Calamity. Rogues didn't just want the job done, he needed to prove he was more than some replacement for his brother. Yohei snapped his tongue with rage. If those Rogues hated his brother that bad, they could have just mind-controlled him like he tried with them. Ikemoto nodded, but Karen cut in and said that wouldn't have. Because Victor's skill wipes out everyone else's powers. So basically, this guy is a sta, pure hype in human form. Victor himself could barely process it, and Philia beside him demanded he confirm it was real, because her appraisal hadn't shown a thing. Karen told them it probably wiped out even Philia's appraisal, because Karen's version was a replica she forged with alchemy, and that's exactly why it worked on him. King Hill finally exhaled. He'd assumed both his sons were powerless, but the truth hit him hard. Both of them carried serious skills. Then he cornered Rogues and demanded to know what could evict those powers, and Rogues just admitted he had a suspicion. King Hills snapped to attention, wondering if he'd tried mind control on Vic, because Vic didn't seem like his head at all. King Hills pressed him, asking, "Did you try it on him in Philia too?" So he nodded and agreed. But it didn't faze the king at all, not because he was immune, but because his personality was all caution and fear. Mind control only works when there's a crack in the heart, and his was solid. As for Philia, he basically ordered her to stop praising him, because he couldn't risk letting anyone else realize mind control was even in play. Yohei clicked his tongue and felt it. Something was seriously off. There was no way a scumbag like Rogues could ever be loved by his sister. Ikemoto nodded too, like the answer was obvious. The real problem was the skill. Rogues yelled back, brushing off the accusations, and all he demanded was this: "Philia, don't appraise me." And the truth was, her feelings for him were real. Desperation hit him as he turned toward her, but she cowered behind Victor, shaking with fear, and the Rogues finally bowed their heads to their feet, though it all felt like it might have been staged. He could practically feel Gerudo's glare burning into him, so he snapped that he didn't want pity, and swore that one day, Gerudo would finally get it. That gut-dropping moment when he can't tell if their love is real, or if it's just the magic trick his talent pulls off. It was supposed to be harmless, just control. He never mind-controlled anyone into loving him. Sure, their feelings felt real, but what if they were? Eventually, he realized bonds and emotions were just empty things, because one skill could rewrite it all. He's praying Haruto never turns into that. After that, the Rogues were quietly locked under house arrest, like someone flipped the world's volume down on them. Because the royal family refuses to let the public know the first prince teamed up with a hero to shatter the Calamity's seal, Yohei, Ikemoto, and the royal guards are all locked under the same threat, until they prove whether they acted on their own or were being controlled from the shadows. Victor leaned in and grilled Haruto. Where the heck did he learn the Calamity was locked away in paradise? Because even Victor had to claw his way through the royal library's forbidden stacks just to confirm it. Haruto snapped back, saying Meffles. The legendary holy dragon leaned in and told them she'd been trapped deep inside the royal family's tomb, mistaken for some evil dragon, and Vic absolutely couldn't wrap his head around it. Now it finally clicked. If Haruto knew about the artifact, then that meant one thing. Could he have tamed Meffles too? Turns out he did, but it's not really taming at all, more like she's lending them her strength. So they agreed to help shatter Meffles' seal, meaning they had to go straight to paradise, and if he tamed vicious monsters and kept leveling up, then she'd finally get strong enough to break her own seal too. Philia told her brother, Vic, to break the seal, and since Lord Balth was already hunting for a way to undo Tame, Vic's skill might be the key to that fight too, right? Mina, Karen, and even Rai shut it down. They're not doing that. They started spouting excuses. Haruto's skill is passive, so he can't really lift the effects from everyone else, and then warned that if they unravel the tame version, they'll bleed a ton of power, and that could spell trouble. As soon as they left, they grilled Haruto sure about this. He even refused to stay at the castle because his monsters needed him. Sure, the castle would have handed Mina and Karin a better life, but they still chose to ride with him. Haruto couldn't stop replaying Rogue's words from earlier, and Mina clocked exactly what was going on. So she insisted it would be painfully awkward to head back to the castle right now. And that's her decision, so why would he take Rogue's words that seriously? Karen nodded too. She's been by his side even before he managed to tame her, remember. Yeah, I get it, but Mina's different, and he truly believed she'd be fine at the castle, so why was she tailing him? She closed the distance. Come on, can't you see it? Because she likes him, no other reason. Haruto's cheeks burst into a fierce blush. Mina smirked and basically admitted she loved this lifestyle, then spun away, wagging the question like a dare. So what's wrong? Because Haruto's face was beet red. Haruto blurted out in shock when he realized she was totally teasing him, and Mina just burst into laughter. Haruto figured he could control people, but his arrogance made him wonder, was Mina worried about him? Karen shut that down and admitted Mina just backed out halfway, which made Mina's cheeks burn with blush and pure embarrassment. Haruto couldn't read hearts, but he did know one thing. He loved this life too, because seriously, who would? You've got 2 cute girls and a whole bunch of pets. 1 week after that brutal fight with the rogues, Philia dragged him back to paradise. They tore into the land clearing, with Mina's magic blazing at their side, and she's just casually tossing the forest into flames like it's nothing. Yeah, she's absolutely fired up about pushing land development on the I territory, the same land Haruto ended up ruling as lord. Haruto's squad got yanked back to the royal palace, and as soon as Victor returned and was crowned the first prince, Haruto congratulated him. Victor just beamed with pure gratitude, because in the end, it all came down to Karen's crazy concoction. That kept him up and moving for way longer. Yeah, this is some serious medicine. But when he came back, a fresh disaster hit, and that's why he pulled him in, because it all traces back to Rogue's collapse. Nobody else said why he fell, or even how it happened, but rumors are flying like wildfire, and at this point, the upper ranks of the kingdom treat it like an open secret. Then he finally returns, crowned as the first prince, but he's sickly, pale with weakness, and far less commanding than the rogues who rule the court. Looks like some nobles have started acting mighty suspicious. Especially Duke Eard, and his uncle doesn't even pretend. He's openly throwing daggers with every hostile look. Being the prince's uncle made him the king's brother, so yeah, he wasn't just related to the crown, he was royalty too. No, this isn't just the duke staking a claim to the throne, even his own son is in the running. His name is Lois. He's insanely talented, wildly loved, and somehow perfect, which makes him feel like an even bigger threat than Duke Eard himself. Honestly, if it weren't for his uncle, Vic would have handed over the throne with zero hesitation, but this whole mess is way messier than that, and he won't do anything that sends the wrong message. Mina pressed him, asking if this was really about them watching his uncle, and Vic snapped back no, then swung open a map. His uncle's territory right up against the forest, right where the paradise dungeon lurks. Haruto set his familiars up in that forest, right? And yeah, he didn't bring just a few, he brought a ton, because that place was perfect. Even better, the town of Kask and the guild gave him the green light. Still not good enough, Victor snapped, saying that even with permission, that place is packed with adventurers, so accidents can still strike. So he decides to hand that land over to Haruto and make it his territory. He pushed to develop the forest as a proper lord's domain, carving out a town, and of course, they'd back him all the way. Haruto's gaze snapped to Vic the moment he asked whether they should serve as watchdogs over the Eard territory. Vic didn't bat an eye. He even went further, saying he wanted them ready as a military ace too, just in case trouble struck. Haruto couldn't believe he'd actually just go along with it, until Vic grinned and said it'd be unfair to keep denying the truth. And he swears he's not in charge, then he just lays it all out so plainly you can't exactly say no. Haruto questioned the two about what they should do, but every single time they gave the same reply, they're familiars. They'd fall in line behind him no matter what, and in the end, he caved and agreed to it. Sometimes you just gotta bite the bullet, you know. Soon, Mina's magic ripped the forest apart, until a bald spot gaped where the trees used to stand. Karen clocked Haruto's gloomy face and blurted, "What's wrong?" Because he was stuck wondering if joining this lord deal was even a good idea, like they were just pawns being dragged through politics for someone else's gain. Karen reassured him, there's no way the kingdom would cast him aside, especially not after sending Philia, a princess, to stand by his side. Also, letting the familiars have their own land calms him down too, doesn't it? Haruto grinned, eyes soft as he looked at his familiars like they were everything. Right in the middle of their talk, someone suddenly blurted out, "No way," and the whole moment snapped into shock. A scarred man with an axe strode in and demanded some tough muscle to clear the forest, but turns out they weren't even needed. The power a hero holds is straight up unreal, Philia yelled for Haruto, and they introduced Haruto to architect Durin and his craftsman crew, who rolled in with backup straight from the capital. The men came at them like hardened soldiers, and Haruto just bowed back, no questions asked. Durin burst into laughter, praising him for being such a humble lord, and right after that, Philia pushed them forward, telling them to start shaping Haruto into a real, lord-like presence. Duran asked Mina if the trees could be turned into building material, and Mina shut it down instantly. No way. Still, it's fine, because every tree they chop down is a step closer to getting the job done. Then he spun to Haruto and said, "From now on, we need somewhere to stash the cut wood," and Haruto nodded, letting Darin and the others use the empty lot over there. So the second they got the green light, they rushed out, chopped the trees down, and hauled the timber over to that lot. Haruto and his familiars hauled chopped wood over and jumped in to help, while Darin and his whole crew just stared in stunned amazement. Before he could turn to Philia and ask if they were even needed, Philia just grinned and said construction still demands real specialists. Then, right then, one of his members blurted out as a deep cut opened on his arm. Doran strode up to him and snapped, "Go to the cask, get a doctor to stitch you up." Karen burst up behind them and shoved a homemade recovery potion into their hands, insisting they drink it. Then the member poured it straight onto his wound, and they were stunned when magic suddenly sealed the wound and healed them. Even the big-name commercial ones can barely seal a scrape, and that's what makes her legendary. Darin had heard Lord Haruto rips through monsters like a total badass, but these girls, they're trouble on 2 feet. When Darin called them Haruto's wives, Karen went stiff on the spot, right as Haruto and Mina came sprinting in, drawn by the scream. Mina's cheeks flared red, and Haruto rushed in with, "It's not like that. Since he's a noble lord, polygamy is totally allowed." Either way, they're both treated like wives on paper, so Karen suddenly asked, "All right, who's the real wife?" And Haruto and Mina's heads snapped toward her, totally baffled. Karen just grinned, waved her hand, and said she was kidding. She could live as the third or the second wife, no problem. Mina snapped her head to Haruto, eyes blazing, and demanded if he was planning to add more. Then Haruto stumbled back, swore up and down, and insisted Karen was just talking on her own. His gaze darted away in pure discomfort before he bolted outside, claiming the capital's other support group would be here any minute and that they had to go greet them. When they finally arrived, Philia hurried them to visit with a farmer who was seriously terrifying. Like, why was he staring at them with that cold, judgmental look? And then the other guy. He was a court painter, lined up like he owned the place. Visit spun around in awe, stunned that the nature in II territory looked completely untouched, while Line vowed they'd properly capture every bit of their heroic work. Haruto clasped their hands and swept them into his territory, then straight up said they'd begin by testing the soil for farming. It's so untouched and wild that even plowing it feels like a fight. Mina stepped in with the monsters too, because for the soil analysis, Karen and Philia's appraisal skills were exactly what they needed. In gratitude, he pressed the rare herb he'd gathered into Karen's hands. He was certain she'd squeeze every bit of power out of it through synthesis. All right, if they're going to do this, they need to go all in on that land development. Haruto's familiars swooped in, hauling the chopped firewood like it was nothing. Mina threw her strength into the work, helping plow the soil until the ground was ready. Meanwhile, Rito and his squad, together with Lulu, closed in and trapped Lane as he painted them. Philia couldn't believe how fast everything was moving, and Haruto bragged that it was all because of them, because they'd been so incredible, yet Philia still pressed, asking if he was really sure. She wasn't trying to drag the castle into it, she wanted help from their classmates instead, because she'd already brought this up at the castle before, and the people who trash-talked him aren't even there now. She just figured that if everyone worked together on the territory, maybe even those old grudges could finally thaw. Ruto told her it was okay, and yeah, without the rogues, it's still not that simple for everyone to accept him, a guy who can rein in monsters and even humans. Neither he nor Karen had a single friend in class, and it showed. So yeah, they both stood by their choices with zero regrets, but Mina was the one thing he couldn't shake. When they brought it up inside the castle, he leaned in and asked Mina, "Are you really okay with this?" She had a friend sitting right there in class, so wait, did they mean Megumi? She told them it's fine, but you could feel her worry, because after hearing she's been locking herself away for all kinds of reasons, Megumi has to be okay, she's strong, so she'll bounce back. And honestly, it looks like the castle's protecting her too, because her popping up out of nowhere right when they thought she was dead, that would scramble everyone's heads for sure. So yeah, this is exactly why it's all good. Back at the castle, Megumi was curled on the floor, clutching her legs like she couldn't face the world. Dark bags crushed her face, and the life drained out of her eyes like hope slipping away. She suddenly remembered that moment they crashed into a truly brutal boss. An event erupted in total chaos, ripping lives apart with brutal deaths and endless injuries. She poured every ounce of her strength into saving a knight who was barely hanging on, with a brutal wound tearing through him. And then more soldiers surged in toward her, insisting that even more people were lined up, desperate for her help. Since almost everyone had been hit by the same brutal trauma, they were forced to pass the nightmare from one person to the next in a grim loop, and the weight of that burden crushed her heart with guilt. Friend rushed to calm her down, insisting none of the soldiers' deaths were on her shoulders, then flipped it around. So many lived only because she stood her ground. Everyone was grateful, swearing they were spared because she refused to give up, and because she kept fighting to heal them right up to the very end. And he urged her to hook up with the other heroes, convinced that being around people who felt like family would spark her spirits back to life. Megumi took that advice to heart and bolted out the door. She stepped up and told the group, "I'm doing way better now." He looked around and realized Yohei and Akimoto were gone. Harada told me those two were wrecking their way through a level 8 dungeon right now, and they'd been grinding on that expedition for ages. Harada shot Megumi an apology for ditching the dungeon conquest and leaving it all on her shoulders, and swore he'd back them up with everything he had, straight from the castle. Megumi felt the whole classroom vibe go weird, because Harada suddenly started bulldozing everyone like a pushy bully, yet they'd barely even talked before. If her memory didn't lie, Harada wasn't on her, and Yohei's combat crew at all. She was tied to the lifestyle team, the one living it up at the castle. Now that I think about it, Yohei's always been unable to stand Harada. She annoyed him to no end, and he couldn't find her attractive either. Rogues figured that out of all the heroes, Harada probably had the strongest fighting edge. She moved like an athlete and had the battle skills to prove it. But she had no guts to step into a strange world and square off with enemies she couldn't even name. Meanwhile, after he found out, there wasn't much to do in the Haruto territory. The princess grabbed Haruto and demanded he come visit, right now. Rush into the town and recruit settlers like it's a last-chance mission. Mina couldn't shake the feeling this whole thing was unnecessary, like she and the monsters already gave them more than enough muscle for development. Haruto snapped that this was the whole problem. People who show up for development usually end up as permanent residents, but for them, the workforce was mostly monsters. If this kept going, that land would get wiped clean, no people left, just emptiness. If they waited until the territory was already finished to recruit, the town would just mirror their own little agenda. So they decided to pull in the residents' voices while it was still being built, shaping it into something way more alive. Living out in some dead, monster-filled wilderness would make them look less like heroes and more like demon lords. They chose to kick off recruiting right in the busiest crowds, and somehow convinced Lisa, who was ready to open a brand new Koyut branch store there. When he realized they were the heroes forging a brand new territory, everything changed. Lisa's mother finally nodded and gave her daughter permission to go. She figured Lisa was at the age where real experience could forge her, and she trusted that her daughter would be safe as long as the heroes were around. About the shop, she told him she could always call her husband back if they suddenly needed extra hands. He's an adventurer, and roughly half of their ingredients are dragged back from his own wild travels. Hearing that, Hirtu immediately thought, let us have the guild post our recruitment too. Lisa shot back that they needed merchants living right there, plus steady food suppliers to keep everyone fed, and sent guards to guard the trade, because once they were opening a restaurant, they needed real specialized skills too. After taking in these suggestions, they tore over to the guild and slapped the notice up for everyone to see. A few days later, just like that, word hit the streets that they'd claimed new territory and that anyone could move in right away, with plenty of jobs waiting for every single person ready to help build it. Spotting the chaos erupting in front of him, Philly threw their popularity under the spotlight and proved just how massive they'd become. Hirtu couldn't shake the fear. Was this really okay? Because she worried they were about to yank people out of the town. The princess reassured him it was totally fine, because the locals weren't about to disappear. Most of the ones who were leaving were the workers who'd only come in to ask for a job in the first place. He stayed put while abnormal monster outbreaks tore through town, juggling business and investigations, and now most people were suddenly left jobless. Hirtu blamed himself for taming the monsters, but the princess shut that down fast. She insisted it wasn't his fault, and as the monster horde thinned, more people lived. So once it looked like everyone would have to shuffle residences anyway, she pushed, "We should go greet the neighboring lords right now." Realizing she'd already reached out to them ahead of time. They finally reached a state where Count Lemon greeted them with open arms. He sprinted up to the princess and begged her forgiveness for being so late with his greetings. He admitted he got swept up in the moment and totally lost control around the heroes. After an assistant leaned in and told him quietly, she ushered everyone straight into the reception room. As the count and the princess leaned in, they argued over the land and the coming harvest. Haruto noticed they had dragged their feet for ages just to. As he got pulled into side conversations, he suddenly realized the noble meetings weren't like anything else. Like the princess warned him, they didn't jump straight into the big topic. First they spun a little small talk to warm the air, and then the real conversation could start. And jumping straight into the businesslike, that would come off way too cold. Since the real topic was already sent ahead, there was nothing to panic about. The count finally locked his gaze on him and turned the story his way. He openly admitted his plan to develop the forest near Cask and promised to pitch in with whatever help they needed. The princess leaned in and told the count that the royal capital had cooked up countermeasures for when too many folks tried to relocate. Lemon loved it, grinning, and joked that if his own role let him, he'd move in there himself. He offered up his own attendance and even a night too. While everything got slammed during the first chaotic stretch, then Hereto asked, "Is this really too much?" The count insisted this was all for their education, telling Hereto to put the young knights to work in training exercises. Then he sent the assistant off to handle the arrangements. The count let it slip. She was a die-hard fan of the heroes, and she practically begged them to take her with them. Her name was Sakuha, an insanely talented newcomer, and she was his adopted daughter because Layman had a habit of taking in orphans from his territory. Since fate never handed him many children to call his own. The princess leaned toward Haruto and praised Sakuha's breathtaking beauty. He added that if they joined together, it would lock in the perfect bond with Count Lemon. The count made it crystal clear Sakuha wasn't the only target, and then ordered Haruto to grab whoever caught his fancy. The greeting rounds kept rolling along like clockwork, smooth and unstoppable. And Haruto felt this wave of relief. Everyone was so friendly, and he credited it all to his own good heart. But that last meeting was never going to be easy. It all came down to Duke Yerd. Mina snapped at him to get it together, daring him to stay on track, because if he screwed up, she'd blow the whole mess apart. At first, she thought it was all a joke. Then she saw the truth and realized she wasn't playing around for even a second. Spotting a threat to his turf, Haruto couldn't believe how far everything had come. His shock hit him like a wave. Pulled off the impossible in the short time they'd been gone. Doran swore the monsters drove all that progress, praising how the goblins' power and teamwork were honestly jaw-dropping. He's trying to build houses for those goblins too, but they shut him down, saying they don't need a single one. Durena told him to put human houses first since the monsters were living wild to begin with, and he nodded fast, then climbed the ladder with her, saying the builds in the forest clearing were already flying at an insane pace, even if there was still a whole mountain of work left. Herdu grinned, thrilled to see everyone had clicked with the monsters while he was gone, and Rai practically leapt at him the second he showed up. Then right on cue, a bunch of strangers poured in, hopping in on Rito's kin and rolling deep. One guy rolled up and introduced himself as Rid, then told everyone he and his crew came straight after spotting the guild's recruitment notice. They marched in and bowed deep, greeting Hardo like the lord they swore to serve. Hardo couldn't believe anyone else would dare ride Rito's kin, yet Rit brushed it off, saying they were just on the same wavelength. As the beast folk closed in, he told them that under those orders, they'd been patrolling the perimeter and mapping the whole area by following every scent with their sharp noses. She and her two friends thanked him, then it hit them. He had no idea who Rates even was. Kareen snapped the truth into him. Rades wasn't just some guy. He was Phileas Butler, the princess's pick to run everything while they were gone. Hertu just nodded, realizing his brain had been so locked on greeting the other lords that he somehow missed that crucial detail. The grid stretched straight toward the mansion where Ratsies was waiting there, ready to greet them like heroes, and the group couldn't believe the building. Inside and out, it was absolutely breathtaking. Rates cleared it up fast. This wasn't just a random base, it was their living headquarters, packed with private quarters, offices, guest rooms, and the admin spaces to run the whole operation. He even carved out a special back resting spot, just for Hardu's three most important familiars. Rades then told them the princess was in the office right now, so he asked if they wanted to rush over and see her, or take a moment to rest first. Hard 2 decided to drop by the office for a quick visit. Then he finally decided to crash and rest until dinner rolled around. Meanwhile, Mina sprawled in bed, her mind spiraling with Haritu, replaying the way he'd stood before the other lords and stayed unnervingly calm. She sensed he'd finally stepped into the shoes of a real ruler, but the more he changed, the farther it felt like he was slipping from her grasp. While she wielded strong magic, she feared everyone else had the real, practical help. Philia handled government affairs, Karen brewed potions like it was nothing, and Sakuha, set to arrive any day now, was already skilled at managing a lord's personal needs. It feels like Haruto's fate is slipping away, like he's headed to lose out and end up with someone else at this rate. She started to panic as his name as both a lord and a hero kept rising, because she could already picture crowds of women swarming him, and she knew he had a weak spot for overly bold pushers, so she worried he'd get steamrolled by someone else's relentless persistence. Even if she thought he was faithful, the truth was he was so clueless he never once clocked what she was feeling. And while she worried that heroes always drew romance and that nobles could freely juggle multiple partners, he kept acting like their closeness was just another win from his taming talent. He was hauling 5 women at once like it was nothing, pushed her past the edge until she snapped and shouted in pure frustration. She waved it off like it was nothing but a wild, ridiculous fantasy. Mina finally decided it was time to confess her feelings for real, but the fear gnawed at her. What if he chalked it up to the taming effect? She thought about begging Prince Victor to unleash his nullification power on the tamed creature, convinced that if she twisted it just right, she could snap the magical bond. Sure, losing the tame power would have been a brutal blow, but she couldn't bear the idea that she'd only be with Haruto if that excuse was always in her pocket. She stared at herself, taking it all in, and let the reality of their brand new living arrangement hit her like a wave. Servants, she suddenly got it. Once his lord duties ramped up, they'd be split into separate rooms, with far less time to stay close. Next, panic started creeping in, and she couldn't stop asking herself, what do I do right now? Haruto called everyone together for a meeting too, to pitch a smaller, smarter house they could actually live in. He admitted this mansion was so huge he couldn't even breathe easy. And he also wanted to carve out a special hideout for the other monsters, basically like the space they'd built behind the estate, while Darren initially figured Haruto just wanted yet another huge mansion on freshly cleared land. Haruto told them that in his old world, homes had tons of comforts, things everyone here desperately lacked. He ordered Darren to copy every single one of those features, even if it meant inventing brand new tech and bashing his way through trial and error, and Darren cut him off, demanding to know if Haruto really expected him to build unknown technology from another world, even with the request basically screaming, impossible. Darren eyed the challenge, felt its spark in his gut, and accepted without hesitation. Haruto snapped into action and started sketching out exactly what he needed. He broke it down like this: today's houses run on gas, electricity, running water, and all the communication lines that keep you connected. He tracked everything from the central facilities and realized the usual setup: power and signals from above, gas and water from the underground, might all be swapped out with magic, and Darn couldn't stop hyping up gas, electricity, and even air conditioning. Philia said she'd been told heroes can spark huge changes, but she never expected them to have knowledge this advanced. Then Mina shot back that they didn't invent any of it themselves, and straight up wondered why the heroes stuck at the castle never pitched ideas like these. So when she found out they hadn't got it, she figured the heroes probably had servants doing all the chores, and when Korean brought up how great a big public bath sounded, it all clicked. Haruto told Rid to scout the northern mine for hot springs. If they turned up even one, he wanted to pipe that steaming water straight back to their home. Following the princess's nudge, he ordered Rid to stake out the mine and hunt for the Orvans. So he warned Rid, don't you dare gamble with unnecessary risks if deadly monsters are lurking, and if it gets hairy, call for backup. And Haruto, he was stepping up more and more, faster every second. They couldn't ignore that a showdown with Duke Eard was coming, so they pushed to bulk up their resources. And the promise of a dream house. With its own steamy hot spring, it genuinely lit a spark of excitement in him. Kareen demanded to know if they really had enough money to pull off a project this audacious. The princess admitted it straight up, building a whole new residence, shelling out for development, hiring staff, and even funding a hot spring excavation would burn a massive hole in their budget. Haruto pushed for their next official report as the perfect excuse to lock in the funding, and threw out the idea of heading back to the royal tomb. They couldn't pull off the clear rewards back when they visited last time, so they're trying again now. Meanwhile, deep inside the castle walls, Royce, Duke Yeard's eldest son, stepped up and greeted the heroes with perfect politeness, as if every word had been rehearsed. And he couldn't hide it, meeting them felt like a real honor. Prince Victor leaned in and told the whole group, "Royce is my cousin, because Duke Yeard is the king's little brother." A wave of blushing spread across several girls the moment they saw him. Herda stepped up to Royce and asked what name she should use for him, and Royce laughed it off, saying she didn't have to worry at all, then told her to call him by her name, Rico. That twist made Harada wonder, was he already head over heels for her? Relief washed over her, because the kindness she showed in front of Victorkin didn't just matter to him, it clearly hit Royce too. She offered Victor a quiet apology, then snapped her attention to Royce, because she wanted to be the one getting chased. Her face twisted dark the moment. The moment Megumi showed up, she grilled Royce, "So what are you doing here?" Harada snapped in irritation that she was about to ask the exact same thing, watching the whole exchange like a hawk. Royce couldn't shake the weird feeling. Megumi's holy magic was insanely valuable, and she was the muscle that helped drive out the shadow, yet Harada sat in the leader's seat like it was his for the taking, despite having no real accomplishments. Concluding that the values of these folks from another world were downright hard to decipher. Still, he was convinced, if he could win over the group's leader, he could command the whole body. Royce gently took Harada's hand. He made it clear his only mission was to meet the heroes. He admitted his wins couldn't hold a candle to theirs. Years slid by, they were close in age, and he secretly prayed they'd click and become real friends. He shot the prince a look, sure Vic had clocked his real move, because there was no way Vic could dodge the heroes. He worried that people would see the palace as trying to take all the credit, and that would turn the heroes into a bad deal. Royce felt sure he could win them over, just like his father demanded. Yet doubts gnawed at him. Could they really hold their ground against Harado and his crew? Just from a split-second glimpse of Harado's party at the estate, a crushing surge of power slammed into him. His fist clenched tight, like he was about to explode. He vowed to stack up enough power to finally crush Harado and his crew. Methyles stared in disbelief at just how wildly Haruto had changed. He kept building power, steadily getting stronger with every passing moment. When she asked if he'd finally conquered paradise, he nodded and said, Yeah, we did. But even after all that, they still couldn't wipe out the calamity. They just dragged the magic tool back from the wreckage." Methyles shot him a confident grin and told him straight up, at his current level, he could probably take on even Calamity-class monsters. Then her focus snapped onto Lulu, who she swore was a survivor of the rainbow dragons. She told them that Lulu and creatures like her hold 7 colors within them, bend the power of the heavens, and unleash true abundance. A divine beast that can transform into something that's on Methyles' level, truly an equal existence. Haruto started to wonder if it was even right to try and tame a monster like this, but Methylaus just chuckled and basically asked, "Why are you worrying now?" After all, he'd already tamed her a holy dragon. She pointed out that dragons don't level up overnight, so Lulu won't reach that power anytime soon, but Lulu's potential is limitless, and as Haruto gets stronger, the Tane's synergy will turbocharge Lulu's growth. When he got hit with the question about why they were even there, Haruto told them he was hunting down more of the treasure, saying he was hard at work on the forest near Paradise and gearing up to become a lord. Methyles snapped that he'd need money to make it happen, but also reminded him those riches were his, no matter what. She snapped at him not to lose sight of their real mission, because she was handing him her power so he could finally break her seal, using the Tame's enhancement to unlock the strength he'd need. Sure, being a lord had its duties, but she made it crystal clear he couldn't ignore training and building his own power. Next, right after their talk, the princess's eyes went wide with pure, breathless awe. At the foot of the treasure mountain, right there in front of them, the prize was calling. She realized they'd never pull off swapping that giant hoard for cash in one go, so she pushed a smarter plan, lock up everything in the royal treasury except what they needed right now. Haruto nodded, admitting their own land couldn't even hold that kind of fortune. The princess started scanning every item, hunting for whatever she could use right away. She told him this hoard could be worth more than the entire royal treasury, and Haruto didn't even flinch, he was just hungry. With the mountain of treasure dragged into the royal treasury, the princess couldn't help but wonder, could even the royal treasury realistically foot the bill for an exchange that massive? Right then she caught sight of Megumi, standing there all by herself. After she greeted her, the princess leaned in and asked if Megumi was finally feeling better, while Megumi grinned and insisted she was totally fine. The princess saw right through the act, grabbed her by the truth, and forced her to spill what was really eating at her. Meanwhile, Royce stepped up and formally introduced himself to Haruto. As the eldest heir of the powerful Duke-Yerd family, he admitted he'd been hearing nonstop about Haruto's legendary reputation, and meeting him felt like an honor, while Haruto nodded and said Royce was just as famous. Royce waved off the praise with a humble grin, admitting he was still too green, and brushing off the idea of comparing himself to the heroes. Even after the rumors, Royce still looked stunned when he saw monsters actually breaking ground and building everything right in front of him, wondering if that result came from the power of the tamed creatures too. Karen murmured that it felt incredible when someone praised her with real warmth, but Mina snapped that it wasn't praise at all, it was pure sarcasm. Royce then leaned in and asked if turning a creature into a familiar came with specific rules, because a bond like that, built on real trust, was something you'd never get from plain warhorses or riding dragons, and he even pressed for whether there was some hidden trick before and after using the tame skill. Haruto stared at the man, wondering if this was some slick attempt to fish for information, but ignoring him would look rude, so he swallowed the awkward tension and admitted the truth. It was a deal built on mutual benefit. Consteurs put their own safety first, and he promised to keep them protected if he could tame them in return. Like a straight-up contract, he laid out word for word. Royce stared in disbelief, because he'd thought taming was only about forcing obedience. And you could see he was genuinely overwhelmed by the way Haruto treated his familiars. Royce changed the subject to the hero's look, then snapped that they couldn't ignore the crushing calamity, and asked Haruto if he had any info. Haruto snapped back that no, he didn't, and then shot back, so that threat isn't an evil spirit, right? Royce said nobody can say for sure, and that an investigation has to happen, because the truth behind the calamity is a nightmare right now. The kingdom can only keep the hero's massive military running, thanks to the "we're facing a real threat" excuse, but with pressure swelling from inside and out, the Exiled family was ready to throw every resource they had into a nationwide investigation, including the paradise, if Haruto just gave the okay. Sensing that an investigation like this would hand a hostile force a clear path to slip right into the royal palace area, Haruto demanded that Roy get the palace's permission before he even steps in. Royce nodded, then sprinted straight for the palace. He told the other heroes that the Exiled family wanted to dig into the calamity, right for their benefit. He promised them that once the threat was gone, everyone could go right back to their original world, yet a weird smirk still lurked behind his "everything will be fine" smile. When Haruto and his crew burst back into their territory, they were blown away to see a sleek, modern house waiting right there for them. Darn shot them a worried look and asked if a lord's home really belonged buried in the middle of a forest, even if the place still wasn't finished. Then Haruto shrugged and confirmed it, saying this was the perfect spot to stay close to his familiars. Darren admitted it, standing amid that kind of fighting force made the home safer than any fortress out there. At that exact moment, the princess barreled straight toward them, pure urgency in every step. Rumors hit the Ayard territory like a storm. Something awful had happened. A little while earlier, Royce hauled himself back into the AR to tell everyone to enter his father's office. A butler rushed the same news to Duke Ayard, but the Duke snapped him off it and ordered him to tell the guild to storm the plague nest instead. Once the butler finally slipped out, the Duke leaned in and told Royce that the plague nest had finally been activated. Royce brushed it off as nothing, but something in his gut screamed that the situation was deadly serious. Then the Duke pivoted to a new topic the moment he heard Royce's plan to calm the nobles was going smoothly. He praised his son and said if they could also win over the palace heroes, they'd have enough muscle to tear down the monarchy. Royce started to argue, but then he brought up Haruto's territory. But the butler burst through the door, sprinting in like something was on fire. The scout who went to probe the plague nest came back shaking, bringing news that the outbreak was spreading fast. Miasma blasted out of the site in massive waves, and the surrounding villages were left in ruin. Royce sprinted to the palace to warn the heroes. IRD territory was seconds from annihilation. He shoved the plan into their hands, stopped the miasma from spilling out right now by storming the plague nest and wiping out the source. He bowed low, pleading with the heroes to share their power, and inside his head, he was smiling, because the month he'd spent forging bonds with them had to pay off with their help. Even a dungeon no one had ever mapped would feel conquerable. Then the silence hit, thick and confusing, while the heroes huddled and argued under their breath, already knowing from their books that the plague nest was level 7, and stepping in meant a brutal fight with a boss waiting to ambush them. Prince Victor told Royce the heroes were even more reluctant to fight than anyone expected, because in their original world, war hadn't shown up in decades, so the fear of getting hurt ran way deeper than normal. Yohei was usually the one charging first, but right now, he was nowhere to be found. Harada showed up to lend her his strength. He leaned in and kissed her cheek, then blurted out an apology. He couldn't stop himself. Royce felt that declaration hit him like a thunderclap, shaking him to the core. Harada admitted she wasn't built for combat, but she stepped in anyway, offering to heal anyone who headed into battle. She meant it too. She'd do it only for Royce and for nobody else. Even from far away, Aaron could spot the abnormality like it was screaming at him. Days had dragged on since that miasma started pouring out, and every new day only made the whole mess spiral faster and worse. Watching wave after wave of refugees rush toward their land and camp, Harada finally snapped to the truth. This crisis wasn't going to be solved anytime soon. He was sure they'd be okay if they just swallowed Karen's anti-miasma medicine, the one she'd painstakingly compounded. Duke Iger's pride slammed the door shut on any charity, even when it came from people he considered enemies. Karen pushed the idea of handing out the medicine without permission, but the princess warned that if anyone meddled in their internal affairs, the Duke would seize the excuse and march in, kickstarting a full-blown war. He knew the miasma was only a countdown away from swallowing his own land. Haruto finally understood they'd have to march into IRD territory and smash the plague nest themselves, right into a head-on brawl with the Duke, and before that day came, he decided to make his move. So he demanded that Philia rush back to the capital. The princess nodded, and she said yes, and told him to call her the moment anything goes wrong. When Karen blurts out, "Why now?" Haruto fires back that if things keep going like this, war with the Yerd territory is going to explode, and if Philia is still here when it erupts, the royals will blame her for not stopping it. Suddenly, Rid burst in like a bolt of lightning, ready to take over the moment and rush toward the next line. One of the heroes finally slipped into IR territory. They knew Megumi's holy magic could slice through the miasma like a holy blade. They were terrified for her, like something terrible might happen at any second. Inside IR territory, Megumi was completely wiped out, running on fumes. Save the people who were hurt. Royce clocked it instantly. She was teetering on the edge of total collapse. Her healing kept the symptoms from exploding, but it only bought time, and the healers from the capital started getting hit by the miasma too, stacking the pain until it all crashed back onto her. He pushed her to rest right then and there. But she shot back, "I'm totally fine," refusing to back down. Royce realized she'd keep going until she dropped, and the only way to stop the plague was to crush the nest at its source. To do that, he needed his father to send military troops. He bolted out, told the knight he'd be back at the mansion, and raced away. The heroes could already see that chilling miasma Royce had warned them about, hanging in the air like a threat with teeth. The king burst in and addressed them straight away, sounding the alarm with every word, then made it crystal clear. He needed their help right now, more than ever. Because the odds were screaming that this really was the calamity. The details lined up too perfectly with old disaster records, and that had everyone on edge. The source led straight to the plague nest, a dungeon nobody in Yerd had dared to fully explore, and the king knew it. Whatever was lurking in those deep corridors had gotten stronger, and it unleashed the outbreak. Harada snapped, questioning whether he was really pushing them to handle that threat. Then when the king confirmed it and made it clear their hero help was the key to an unexplored dungeon, rage flared in Harada's face as she ground her teeth. She jabbed a finger at the source of the miasma and demanded, "So you really expect them to march into a place like that?" She snapped that they got shoved into this world against their will, and that throwing them into real danger like this was a straight-up violation of their rights. The room suddenly went dead silent, and the moment the king bowed to her and apologized for how they'd been summoned, Herodis just smirked and waved it off, like he'd brought nothing but trouble. But then the king's voice sharpened. He insisted that his apology was already more than enough. He told us that the way they treated us like royalty and welcomed us so warmly wasn't an accident. It was a clear sign of the. Under the weight of the kingdom's expectations, they had to step up and nail their roles. When she tried to argue again, the king shut her down, telling her she couldn't hide behind, "I didn't know anymore." They were told crystal clear that they'd been summoned to take down the calamity, and every luxury they got each day came with one brutal expectation: fight. He swore he wouldn't drag them along, but if they said no, they'd be cut off and stripped of the crown's hospitality, and the crowd would probably snap and turn on them too. Then Prince Victor snapped into action and laid out a truly desperate last resort. They could shut down the Duke's entire territory with barrier to hold the miasma meant one brutal choice: abandon everyone trapped inside the borders to die, and the king didn't blink. Past miasma outbreaks had already wiped out half of humanity, so losing a single duchy was nothing compared to saving the world. The heroes felt their hearts drop at the thought of what was coming. and demanded to know everything about Megumi. Still stuck there, trapped in that place with no way out. The prince looked at her with regret and admitted they couldn't move her quietly. Any evacuation would tip off the crowd, spark panic, and ruin everything. When the prince demanded to know if they were finally ready to fight for Megumi's life before the sacrifice happened, Harada acted like she was worried sick, then apologized to Megumi like she'd already written her off, and urges the rest to pray for her, but the other heroes just stay silent, until they finally all agreed to make the move together. They wouldn't leave Megumi behind, because if they were really summoned heroes, they were going to smash whatever threat was coming. Rage simmered in Harada as they clashed with the sheer force of everyone's resolve, and it pushed them to the. She fired off a brutal warning, "You could die," insisting she was doing it purely to keep them safe. The heroes barely even looked her in the eye. They told her, straight up, they'd heard enough, and there was no way they could accept that someone this cold could have become their leader. While the others sprinted out to leave, Harada got stuck behind. Clenching her fists so tight rage surged through her, she cursed them and looking utterly pathetic, like a defeated leader left with nothing but the wreckage of pride. As the knight's heroes and volunteers geared up to ride out, Prince Victor leaned in and ordered the princess to head straight for Haruto's territory. Royce dropped to his knees and begged Haruto's group to save his land. Royce snapped that his father only ever chased the throne. Sure, he'd follow him for the people once, but now that the Duke was ditching them, Royce would not back him anymore. He filed a formal request for Haruto's help, swearing it wouldn't be seen as an illegal invasion of a lord's domain. Haruto pressed Royce on whether he really meant to defy his father, and Royce didn't back down, doubling down on his resolve. Right then, the princess burst in and told them they wouldn't need to go that far with such extreme measures. She reported that the kingdom of Elmond had officially stamped the incident as a ticking calamity in the making. The palace heroes were already sprinting toward the plague nest, racing fate itself. But the kingdom demanded Haruto's group push forward, right now, to start fixing the mess immediately. Haruto's crew nodded and kicked off plans to back up their allies. Then it hit Royce hard. His lone rebellion wasn't needed anymore. The princess cut through the noise and made it crystal clear that this crisis had to be settled fast. The kingdom plotted to swallow all of House Yeard whole. She said that if a lord truly cared for his people, they wouldn't have to tear everything down, and with that, she basically set it up so Royce could rise as the next leader. When Royce grilled him about his father, the princess dropped the bombshell. The Duke was getting forced into retirement, because people were reporting things a lord simply shouldn't be doing. After a beat of gut-wrenching silence, he finally turned his thoughts back on his father. Royce didn't hesitate. He accepted the appointment on the spot. Royce snapped his head toward Haruto and demanded to join the mission. Even as Haruto warned him it was suicide, Royce just swore he wouldn't slow him down. Seeing that unwavering determination blazing in his eyes, Haruto gripped his hand and fired off a quick, firm shake, like a promise before the storm. And side by side, they sprinted out to save the people of Eyard. Inside the IRD state, where everything could tip the balance in an instant, Duke Eyard barked for his knights to slam up a protective barrier as the miasma started creeping into the grounds, and just when his rage was already simmering over his son's long disappearance, the butler's bombshell hit. Royce was back. And then Haruto's army marched straight into their land, crushing their peace. The Duke slammed his desk in a red-hot fury, cursed Haruto nonstop, and accused the boy of turning the chaos into an excuse to grab his lands, then vowed to smash the opposition straight in the face. He barked orders at his forces and sent them crashing in to smash the conceited, fake heroes he couldn't stand. The dukes of the land screamed as the mounted knights crashed forward. Haruto reached the goal and stayed ice-calm, because he'd already seen this resistance coming and stuck to their plan. Mina shot up into the sky and stamped the air with a chain of intricate magic circles. She tore open the sky and unleashed a massive storm on, as the enemy forces surged forward, crushing the Duke's entire army to the last soldier, with one single crushing blow. As the princess wondered if that strike might have been too much, Royce only let out a breath of relief, because Mina wasn't his enemy, she was his ally. As soon as they touched down, Mina told everyone dead serious that she'd been holding back, so nobody got hurt. To keep the realm safe, the princess told Haruto to leave a guard posted at the border, and Haruto nodded and agreed without hesitation, passing the job to Rid and his monstrous crew. As they marched past the defeated soldiers, Roos shot a silent apology his way, then swore he'd bring peace back to the IR territory, even if it meant he had to pay with his life. Meanwhile, down in the local infirmary, things were already starting to get intense. Megumi kept fighting back, healing bite after bite of the infected before it could spread. Desperately, she kept whispering to herself, "I'm fine," like she could force it to be true. This time, she vowed, no matter what, she would save every last one of them. She refused to quit, pushing through every bite of pain until the day she could finally face Mina with her chin up and pride blazing. A blood-curdling scream tore through the building, and she clenched her teeth, terrified something monstrous had slipped inside. Since no one else there could fight, she clenched her teeth and charged straight for the noise. And then he crumpled straight into Mina's arms. Arms launched the second she swung the door open. Mina beamed at her and greeted her warmly. Seeing Megumi like that was shocking. She looked like she'd been through a hurricane, nothing like the girl who normally obsessively fusses over her appearance. She pulled Megumi into a tight hug, praised her for an amazing job, and told her to relax, letting them handle the rest. They slipped inside, and Mina gently let the battered girl curl up, head resting right in her lap. A local priest snapped the group into silence, saying Lady Megumi hadn't even rested once. She'd been mending the sick with raw devotion, and even the ones on death's doorstep still clung to life. Then his voice crumbled as he admitted the worst: the village was finished. As the Duke plotted to seal the land, they couldn't muster the strength to drag the bedridden out. Karen burst forward and shoved the priest a dose of medicine before he could even ask what was going on. He vowed he'd let everyone break free and run for it on their own 2 feet. Even though the priest hesitated at first, the princess stepped up and vouched that the potion truly worked. After ripping off his mask, he downed the medicine in one gulp. The priest felt power explode out of his body on the spot, and Karen told him not to stop. There was still loads more waiting outside to hand to the villagers. Re-energized, the priest bolted over to help the others. Mina whipped around to Haruto and told him they had to get out, right now. Out of their way, this wasn't some simple, save one village job. Their mission was to protect the entire Yurd territory. Haruto nodded and sprinted out, leaving Filyu to carry the village's recovery on her shoulders. With their goal burning bright in their minds, 3 heroes and Royce launched toward the Plague Nest dungeon, sprinting straight into danger. They finally reached the nest. Haruto stared at its sickly, toxic look, wondering if this dungeon was always this way, or if the miasma was the one warping it. Royce watched stunned as even the venom-proof monsters started to buckle, because the dungeon's miasma had clearly gone nuclear with its poison. Even in that brutal wilderness, the whole crew still moved without a hitch, and Royce couldn't help blurting out that Karen's antitoxin potions were straight-up incredible. Karen let out a smug chuckle and told him he was working with a super special batch. Sensing danger creeping in, Mina snapped at them that they had 0 time for small talk, because she could feel the power swelling from deep inside the nest, like it was about to explode. He slammed the conclusion in his head: only the boss could be feeding that rising miasma. Until the boss's chamber finally burst into view. The moment Haruto stepped inside, he realized this dungeon was way smaller than the royal tomb he'd been expecting. He told his pets and Royce to stay put, guarding the luggage while he went on. Royce refused to sit it out. He demanded to jump into the fight. But Haruto shut it down at first, swearing he'd keep Royce away from danger, until Royce fought back, insisting he wouldn't be a burden. Because he had his own one-of-a-kind skills. After he finally uncovered what these abilities really were. Haruto finally caved in and nodded along, then Karen pointed it out. Royce's abilities had to be terrifyingly strong, because even her appraisal skill couldn't read him at all. As they pushed deeper into the place, they were hit so hard with a flash that everything went white for a split second, right as a massive flower field suddenly blazed with blinding light. They spotted a tiny bunny darting around nearby. Could a monster like that really be running the whole place as the boss? Suddenly a strange liquid oozed out, like it shouldn't exist. Liquid came crashing down from above. And then this gigantic, mysterious monster just burst out of nowhere. The real boss behind the nest. To their absolute shock, the creature bolted the second it saw them, trying to escape right away. It's terrifying to think that if that much poison ever spilled out of the dungeon, everything outside would collapse in minutes, so Mina didn't hesitate and blasted the monster with a fire spell right away, igniting a colossal explosion the moment it slammed into place. But the flames still roared. As soon as the times fired up, the miasma around them erupted into raging flames, revealing that the air wasn't just poisonous, it was primed to burst into flames. Haruto grabbed his head and scanned the chaos, making sure everyone was still standing after that blast. Even after that blow landed, the boss started moving again. racing toward the exit. Dazed from the explosion, Hardo snapped to the worst thought. What if they couldn't stop that creature from slipping out? Roy planted his feet at the gate, roaring that no beast was getting through. Seeing him totally unscathed after the blast, Haruto remembered it. Royce's skill was a counter, and one slip would cost him everything. So with that in place, he could fling every hit right back at the monster. Royce snapped a magic circle into existence and dared it to strike first, launching one huge shockwave that sent. He kicked up a storm of dust that blasted through the air in every direction. When the smoke finally lifted, Royce dropped to the moment and apologized. Haruto clocked the damage. He'd only scarred the monster's outer skin, and in that instant, he knew everything had tipped into a full-blown crisis. The boss burst outside in one smooth escape, and the vehicle followed him. He barked an order for everyone to launch into the chase right now, then the chapter slammed shut at 27. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you absolutely love this manga. Have a great day.